Alright, what is up, YouTube? I got 2 pieces of vegan content for you guys that I'm going to react to today. The first one is a post by Lauren Southern. It's called Debating a Vegan About His Disorder, posted on September the 14th. It is now September the 18th, so this is fresh content, posted only 4 days ago. And then we'll also be reacting to this Nutrivore field trip number 2, Appoota versus Samir Dossani. I probably just butchered all of that. On the ethics of animal agriculture. So, yep, 2 debates, 2 vegan debates we're going to be reacting to. And, yeah, the other one's not quite as fresh. It was posted a couple months ago, June 27th, which is a day before my birthday. Huh. Anyways, thought we'd crack a fresh one and get into it. Cheers. Alright, and without further ado, let's get into it. Before I even start, just looking at the title, Debating a Vegan About His Disorder, it brings up a couple questions, right? Like, first of all, if you're debating a vegan, presumably it's about veganism, right? So I don't know if this is trying to imply that, like, veganism is a disorder, right? Like, I've heard that a strange position, or like that the vegan diet is an example of disordered eating or something like that, right? Like, I've heard these strange claims before. I wouldn't expect that from a large popular YouTuber like Lauren Southern. As you can see, she's got over 700,000 subscribers. So she's a political streamer, for those of you that don't know. Conservative. Yeah. And so that's the first thing I wonder. And, you know, if not, then it seems like it's almost irrelevant to be adding the fact that he's a vegan, right? Like, that's like saying, I'm going to debate a Catholic about their disorder, right? Like, why even mention that they're a vegan or that they're a Catholic if the topic isn't about Catholicism or theism or veganism, right? Like, it just seems totally tangential. So, right off the bat, it's looking like a little sus. Like, it's like, why? So yeah, I'm sure we'll figure out why as we get into it. But let's do that.
Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. I have some horrifying and very exciting news. Why are you filming Jonny Hey everybody.
Okay, so she starts it off with horrifying. That's got my attention, right? Like, what is so horrifying? And the fact that the cameraman was pointing at, what was his name again? Let me rewind this.
Why are you filming Jonny?
Jonny. So, what was I saying? Oh yeah, the fact that he was filming Jonny at the moment she was saying, like, oh, I've got something horrifying to share with you, makes you wonder if, you know, whatever she's referring to that's so horrifying is related to Danny, or, right? Jonny. Ugh, I'm not very good with names, so if I already forget, my apologies. Hopefully they'll use the name more so I can...
Hey everybody, today I have a special treat for you, a proper in-person debate video. I discovered something horrifying while on my documentary shoot, and that is that the cost of food on this trip has been quadrupled by the fact that I have an effing vegan on my shoot. And to make up for that, Jonny, my assistant cameraman slash whatever you do, I don't even know what I'm paying you to do right now.
Yeah. Just annoy you with buying vegan stuff, basically, and stopping you from eating where you want to eat.
Pretty much. But Jonny has agreed to come on my channel and talk slash debate with me about his disorder, which...
Okay, I'll pass you on that.
Oh yeah, sorry guys. I do have AdBlock Plus. It doesn't block YouTube ads for whatever reason, so, and I don't have YouTube Premium, so yeah, we're stuck with ads. My apologies. I'll try to skip them as fast as I can so that we can get through them. Alright, I think it is back.
Which...
Okay, I'll pass you on that one for the sake of getting into it, yeah. By the way, she's talking about this disorder, but like, she won't eat anywhere that doesn't have gluten-free, and she only wants to eat at places where most of the stuff's gluten as well. So like, you'll only eat at places that are basically like Italian, like pancakes, stuff like IHOP, like everything that has gluten, but then she just wants the non-gluten thing. So she goes to the most glutinous menu and then is like, okay, I'll have all of the stuff without gluten, which is basically nothing.
It's been a very complex trip.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it seems like the horrifying thing is vegan food is more expensive, which is another claim that I've heard, which is frankly bullshit, as far as I can tell. I mean, vegan food, it can be expensive, or it can be cheap. Like, you don't have to eat expensive food on a vegan diet in the same way that you don't have to eat expensive food on a non-vegan diet. They're very similar in those respects, right? So, if they're choosing to eat, like, the classier foods, you know, like more processed vegan alternatives and stuff like that, you know, the more luxury products, right? Like, then yeah, it's going to be a little more expensive than you would expect. I don't know about quadruple. I mean, that's a little dramatic, but yeah. I mean, like, I'm broke AF. Like, I am so broke. Like, I don't make any money. Like, I need to fix that because I'm a lazy anyways, a lazy degenerate that that doesn't make a lot of money. But I feed myself on a vegan diet just fine because I just give up luxury foods and I buy things like lentils and bread and bananas and rice and beans, right? Like, this stuff is like super duper cheap. And so I can save a bunch of money. Vegetables too, like I'm buying carrots, you know, and broccoli and stuff like that, right? Like, I don't spend a lot of money on food because vegan food doesn't have to be expensive. Like, I'm not going out and buying the vegan burgers and the vegan pizzas and the vegan ice cream, you know, all that stuff I don't need because I save a ton of money when I do that. And yeah, so it's definitely doable to eat a cheap vegan diet. It's doable to eat a expensive vegan diet. Yeah, I don't think this is something that's like unique to the vegan diet. I think it's exactly the same as a non-vegan diet, although the products which are going to be expensive are going to differ, right? Like, a burger is not necessarily going to be an expensive non-vegan product, but as a vegan product, probably will be, unless you're buying like one of the cheap brands, right? Like, yeah, anyways. So let's continue.
Trying to find like this crosshair of John, who's behind the camera right now, other John, who's normal, vegan, and gluten-free. It's been a nightmare.
Okay, Johnny and Lauren.
Oh, he's other John. You're
Okay.
John.
Well, I actually like John is very chill about this. It's kind of a good job that there's not a third person who's just very awkward to eat.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's bad enough with the two of us.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how you've lost weight, because I mean, judging what you guys have been eating, like, I don't know how you can possibly lose weight on that. But, okay.
The cameraman isn't mic'd, so
yes,
you guys
we're
should
on a
not talk
documentary
to
shoot.
him.
It's been nightmarish, but at least we're gonna get a
Everything he says
damn good
sounds like,
debate out of this, because vegans, they're a problem, and we need to address the vegan problem.
Wow.
But before we get into it, I wanted to give a huge thank you.
Yeah, guys, vegans are the problem, right? It's not the people that are taking sentient beings, exploiting them in the most horrific ways you can imagine, torturing innocent victims, and forcing them to undergo some of the most brutal experiences we could possibly imagine before we mercilessly murder them, right? But the people who are objecting to that, they're the problem, right? Oh yeah. Off to a great start.
To a new sponsor to this channel, the Epic Times. If you haven't heard of them, they are a fantastic...
I have heard of them. I'm not
Okay,
interested in your
reality.
plug. Thanks anyways.
or hidden agendas. So basically they let you, the reader,
Skipping through the plug for your guys' sake and my sake.
forgotten. Despite many attacks.
Yes, that's wonderful.
Because of this, I'm very happy to be partnering with them.
Yes, I'm sure you are.
Check out the link down below in the description.
Yep.
But with real integrity, and would absolutely encourage all of my viewers, go check them out and just give them a chance. Alright, now back to my conversation.
I'm more interested in non-paid promotions. Call me crazy. Like, of course you recommend it if you're getting paid for it. Like, yeah. I mean, it doesn't really... It's not a good reflection of your true feelings when, you know, you're saying that you're getting paid for something and then you're encouraging people to purchase or use it, right? I mean, like, it doesn't automatically mean dishonesty, but it's a conflict of interest. And so, anyways, this is tangential, so we'll keep going.
We'll start with why. Just why? Why would you do this to yourself?
Well, I can tell you it's not for climate change, it's not because I want people to eat bugs, which are definitely not vegan, it's none of that nonsense, none of this WEF, like we've all got to change for that. It is purely based upon the idea that we shouldn't cause unnecessary harm to animals, just like we shouldn't cause unnecessary harm to people, that if we don't have to kill something or cause them suffering, then we shouldn't do it. So he's coming...
Okay, well, firstly, the fact that he's talking about not causing necessary harm. I mean, it bugs me when people say this because most people just assume that we all share this, like, understanding of necessity, and, you know, what's a necessity to one person is definitely a necessity to another person, right? And yeah, there is a certain amount of colloquial understanding around this issue where people will be like, oh yeah, like, these will be considered needs and these won't, and you'll generally find a lot of the populace has like a lot of overlap if we were going to make a Venn diagram or something like that. But there are certain values that are going to be a necessity to one person and not a necessity to another. There's like nothing falls completely within this Venn diagram and when you're comparing different individuals. And so it becomes important to look at necessity and determine exactly what we're referring to. Like necessity with respect to what, right? Because necessity in and of itself requires a goal in order to make sense, right? Like there's no such thing as a necessity simpliciter. Like it has to be, or at least I can't understand the concept of necessity simpliciter, right? Because necessity is always relative to whatever goal we're referencing. So I feel like that needs to be clarified if we're going to talk about what's necessary and what's not. You know, if it's not necessary to do something, then like what do you mean by that? Like not necessary for survival? Not necessary for what? I mean, let's just be specific. So that's something I'd like to know.
From a libertarian non-aggression principle perspective.
What if I have to eat bacon?
Okay, so he's talking about the non-aggression principle, which I did mention that in my last video. I actually forgot what it was called, and I posted it in the video itself if you watch it. But the non-aggression principle, for those of you that don't know, also known as I think it's actually just called the non-aggression principle. And essentially what it is referring to is this concept where individuals that do not aggress on your property or your beingness are considered to be, it's considered immoral to aggress on them in any sort of way. Now, some reductios on this are things like pollution, and I think pollution is probably one of the biggest reductios. So like every time you drive a car or you do anything that's emitting greenhouse gases and stuff like that, well, you're actually aggressing on certain individuals and their health and their well-being and things like that in a very indirect sort of generalized way. And so in that sense, you might be able to say that the non-aggression principle would entail that one would not be able to do things like drive a car or participate in like modern day activities which produce fossil fuels, like purchasing products and things like that. And so that would be a silly entailment of the non-aggression principle, but for the most part, it makes sense. It's generally thought of as the idea that if you're not acting in self-defense in some manner, including defense of your property, although there are some iterations of the non-aggression principle that do not include property, I believe that most of them do, as far as I'm aware. And so it's more or less the idea that like causing violence without undue cause is immoral. And so now she's talking about, what if I have to eat bacon? I mean, yeah, like, again, like, have to with respect to what specifically? Like you have to eat bacon there because what? Hopefully he'll ask me that. I don't know. Let's see.
Can you tell me why you would have to eat bacon?
Yeah.
Okay, so...
Okay, so she said that it tastes good, right? So that means that in order to achieve her taste goal, she needs to have bacon. That's not something I would disagree with necessarily, right? Like, I'm not going to say that she doesn't have that value and that it's therefore not a necessity for her to consume bacon, right? So this is why we need to clarify stuff like this. Like, better question, a good follow-up question, like, why do you believe that consuming or that satisfying your sensuous pleasure, like the taste sense, instead of like visual senses or audio senses or whatever, we're having the taste sense that we're like satisfying. Like, why is the satisfaction of one of your senses a sufficient moral justification to literally torture or to engender torture and murder of innocent sentient victims? I mean, that's a great question. I'd love to know the answer to. I hope he goes there next.
It's good, right? Like, that is ultimately what the justification for eating meat comes to, is that it tastes good, right?
Well, no, that's not ultimately what it comes to. That's commonly what it comes down to. Ultimately, it comes down to whatever the person in question is referring to as their reason for not going vegan, right? Like, so ultimately, you're going to have a variety. You're going to have diversity. So, yeah, I would disagree with that. Oh yeah, one thing. David Rams has already reacted to this. I'll post a link to his reaction down below. If you guys haven't followed David Rams, he's like a super based vegan content creator, and he's funny. He's he's always coming out with fresh content. I highly recommend you follow him. All of the links to his stuff will be down below, so be sure to check him out. Back to the video.
But because something tastes good doesn't justify that you can do harm to another, right? There's many things which are pleasurable to us, right? That you don't just go ahead and do it purely because of your own pleasure. Like, you have to take into consideration the effect you're having on the subject.
Well, no, you don't. I mean, like, I actually disagree with that, like, because what were his words specifically? Like, let me rewind it.
Because something tastes good doesn't justify that you can do harm to another, right? There's many things...
Yeah, because something tastes good does not justify that you could do harm to another. Well, that's not necessarily true. I mean, what if someone just says, like, to me, the taste pleasure does justify torturing and murdering innocent victims en masse, right? Like, there's no reason they couldn't take that position. So, I think that's just straightforwardly false what he's saying.
Purely because of your own pleasure, like, you have to take into consideration the effect you're having on the subject.
Well, on a more...
You don't have to take that into consideration, and some people do not. But most people will, and, for obvious reasons. And I think it's a great time to question them on some of their values and see if they're consistent, right? For example, a lot of people, and he kind of alluded to this in his response, is like a lot of people will not consider causing harm to humans justified, even if you get pleasure out of it. And so, if they do hold the belief that it is justified in the case of animals, but not in the case of humans, then the question becomes, like, what is it that is true of the animals that if it were true of the humans would cause you to have that same moral attitude where you're saying that, oh yeah, it's okay to murder, torture, and abuse them, just because, you know, by virtue of getting a certain amount of pleasure out of it, you know, or however much pleasure that is. And what would it have to be true? What would have to be true of the humans that is true of the animals that causes that differential attitude? That's what I would want to know.
Serious note, I can genuinely say when I eat meat rather than, say, grains, bread, these kind of things, or even just vegetables, my quality of life drastically improves to the point where my health is completely different. If I eat steak for dinner a week in a row, my energy levels, my quality of life is going to go through the roof compared to if I'm
Have you tried being vegan? Have you tried like eating a vegan diet?
No, but I know people who have, and I know people who have had severe health issues because
True.
of it.
And so what? Who cares? I know people that have had severe health issues on a non-vegan diet, okay? Like, what does that have to do with anything? Are you trying to, like, is the claim that people who are on vegan diets can't experience serious health issues? What's the argument for that? Yeah, vegans get health issues, and so do non-vegans. This is a part of life. This doesn't, like, magically go away when you're not vegan, when you go vegan, right? Like, ridiculous.
It's possible to have a vegan diet and to be unhealthy. Like, there's no guarantee you're going to be healthy. Like, but if you eat a well-planned vegan diet and you're getting all of your nutrients from, you know, various fruits and vegetables, and you're eating a balanced diet, like, and you're getting enough calories, that's another big thing. It's like a lot of people, they go vegan and they think, oh, I can just eat exactly the same amount of portion sizes, but I'm just swapping the meat for plants. Well, they're less calorie dense, so you've got to eat more of them. So you have to increase somewhat the amount you eat. You know, it's not.
That always baffled me. Like, do people really do that? Where they're like, oh yeah, I'm just going to, like, put the same exact portion size, and I'm just going to eat that, and it's going to be a replacement for meat, and I'm good. Like, do people really do that? Like, that just blows my mind. Like, when I eat until I'm full, and I feel satisfied. And if I don't feel satisfied, I go eat more, right? Like, is that not normal? Is that not what, like, I don't know. Like, there's got to be some people that don't do this, that genuinely do, like, think this way, and I guess aren't paying attention to how satiated and how full they feel or something. I don't know, man. That it's always tripped me out how people do that, but apparently some people do. They'll starve themselves on a vegan diet by eating inadequate calories, inadequate nutrients, just because the food is not necessarily as nutrient dense as they're used to, you know? Which, like I said, has always been really weird to me. But yeah, back to the video.
Crazy. It's not like 3 or 4 times the amount, but you've got to eat more food to get the same intake. And if you do it in a well-planned way, you're getting your variety of nutrients, then you can absolutely be vegan.
And that's as a general heuristic, right? Like, you can, like, plan a diet that's completely vegan and that uses very calorie-dense, very nutrient-dense foods so that you don't have to eat a whole bunch of it in order to receive your nutrients. Or, you know, I shouldn't say a whole bunch of it, but, like, more than is average with respect to non-vegan products, right? So, in my experience, like, I didn't notice much of a difference when I went vegan. I just make serving sizes like I always have, and, yeah, like I said, I eat till I'm satisfied. Maybe that's why I didn't notice a difference. I don't know. I don't think that the nutrient density causes a dramatic shift in how much you have to eat. Like, no one looks at my portion sizes and are like, damn, Rob, you eat a lot. Like, no one does that. Like, I don't eat a lot. I also weigh very little. I've always been a very short, very skinny dude. So, like, the most I've ever weighed my entire life is 115 pounds. So, I don't know if that has anything to do with my portion sizes. Obviously, it must, so...
For most people, it doesn't take that long. Like a very basic amount of research is gonna get you there.
I think you can only be vegan like, beyond all of the arguments about non-aggression principle, all of the politics around it, like, the genuine reality of being vegan, I think is only something that can happen for first world privileged people. The amount.
Okay, well, you know, that's what does that have to do with anything? Like, even if that was true, which I don't necessarily agree with, right? Like, I think there's plenty of developed countries where people eat primarily vegan diets, and I don't think that there's I suspect that there is no issue with them eating completely vegan diets. I don't know. I need to do some more research into this to actually find out for sure. But, like, even if this was true, like, who cares? Like, what does that have to do with anything, right? Like, the question on the table is, you know, well, actually, there is no question on the table. The question I wish was on the table is, like, why do you consider it morally justified to torture and abuse innocent victims when you know that, like, you could definitely divest from doing so and still live a rich, fulfilling life? And she implies that she doesn't know that, and that she thinks that she could not live a rich, fulfilling life with that, which is, you know, basically nonsense. And he did try to dismiss that by saying, you know, if you do a basic amount of research, not a basic amount of research, but, you know, a decent amount of research, that you should by all means be able to consume a healthy, well-planned diet. And he's absolutely right about that. Like, I think most people that go on a vegan diet, they've probably never planned out a well-planned diet in their life, right? Like, so with a vegan diet, it becomes necessary that you plan your diet because you're going to have to eat somewhat differently than you used to. So that's something to consider, but it's not hard to do. Like, and you don't even have to do a lot of research, right? Just download the Chronometer app and then use the data that they give you to enter all your food servings in. Find out what you're missing in your macronutrients, in your micronutrients, what things are harder for you to reach, and then adjust your diet, you know, so that you can do that. And you might have to do a little bit of research, right? Like, it's like, oh, well, it looks like vitamin A. I'm not getting enough vitamin A. I'm not getting enough zinc. You know, how can I solve that? Maybe you're going to go eat some carrots or eat some oysters, right? Like, yeah, it becomes important to plan your diet. It's easy to do that. Most people are, not most people, I won't say that, but I've met plenty of people who are, you know, they have this idea like Lauren Southern has, where like, oh, if I go vegan, my health is going to fall apart. And that's just not supported by the evidence. So, but again, a well-planned diet is necessary, and that's true of a non-vegan diet. However, the only difference is we've been eating non-vegan diets for so long that there's kind of a general idea of like what you need to do in order to stay healthy and eat enough nutrients. And so people already kind of have like this like transient sort of like loose, foggy notion of like what they need to do to get their nutrients. And there probably are missing nutrients even on a non-vegan diet because, again, most people do not plan their diets. So anyways, I'm going to ramble. I'll let this keep going.
Nutrients that people need to get from vegetables and the amount of variety they have to have and all of these things, like the food that keeps people alive, particularly in third world countries and places where it can be really hard to find nutrient rich vegetables, this kind of stuff, it's going to be meat. Meat is going to be the primary thing giving them, you know, the protein they need to live.
Well, it really depends, right? So, like, I would agree.
Who cares? Like, she's basically saying, like, there's some parts of the world where people are starving and they don't have any other things to eat besides meat. Okay, what does that have to do with the moral argument for veganism, right? Like, nothing. It doesn't actually address the fundamental issue of, if you can divest from causing absolutely horrific harms to sentient, innocent victims, then why would you not?
We do in some certain areas, so like if you are like a Eskimo or something like that, like
yeah, like 99% of their diet is meat. They literally can't.
Yeah, because they can't grow plant. And actually, like a lot of people who live in those communities anyway, they fly in their food anyway. So there's actually very few people who even live in those kind of places that are purely just ice fishing for everything. Like a lot of them do rely upon, you know, very modernized like transit routes and stuff. And you know, with a lot of places like Africa, like a lot of these countries, they actually have very, very predominantly plant-based diets. You know, partly because it's a poverty thing. Like as you.
Yeah, I was under that impression that in cases of extreme poverty in lots of parts of the world, I'm pretty sure. You know, don't quote me on this. Like, I need to do more research. But if I'm not mistaken, I do believe that it is. It's like they're primarily eating plant-based diets that are like largely made up of plants like grains and tubers and stuff like that. And so that's why I was thinking to be able to consume a completely vegan diet, it would just be a matter of withholding the animal products and changing those to plant products instead. So it doesn't seem that far-fetched to me. And he seems to agree. So, but I need to look into it more. Can't say for sure.
And as you have more money, more disposable income, generally we see societies eat more meat. But a lot of them have it culturally as well. They eat plants. You know, places like Ethiopia, they have very predominantly vegan diets naturally, and you know, like it can be a cultural thing.
Ethiopia's doing great.
Well, yeah, I mean, of course you have with some of these places. Of course, you have like high rates of malnutrition, but you have high rates of malnutrition in places because they have low amounts of money. They can't actually get enough food. They can't get enough calories. There's nothing to say that you couldn't. You know, like vegans, as a general like sect of the population, like do very, very well. They score normally very, very high up, if not the best in terms of their health, their overall health. So it's not, veganism is not the way.
Person, like you look at someone like a Michaela Peterson, who literally, she's like, I had severe health issues and depression until I started eating a meat-only diet.
Michaela Peterson is like one of the worst examples you could possibly bring up. Like, she has had serious, like, intense health problems since the very beginning of her life, and they've been primarily related to autoimmune issues, I believe. And so, like, for some people with autoimmune issues that are very severe like that, like, they do need to go on extremely restrictive diets in order to be healthy. But, like, that doesn't tell us anything about the average person, right? Like, it's really tangential to the core issue of animal rights.
Yeah, I mean, you get a lot of kind of stories that are on a kind of you know, an individual basis. People say, oh well, I had meat and it turned around my diet, but like it's not borne out in the actual data as to like why that would make a difference. There's nothing that you're getting from.
That's another great point. It's not the exact same point that he was making, but Michaela Peterson has even admitted that she rejects modern science because it quote unquote failed her, right? And so because of that, like, she is not accepting like peer-reviewed data as an adequate source of medical nutrition knowledge, right? And so she's her position is not a very good reflection of like what we know to be true, especially when we're referring to the average person, because again, she's an outlier. And so if we want to know about the average person, which is Lauren Southern, she's not one of these outliers as near as I can tell, then we need to focus on what the data overall are showing for the vast majority of people, right? Like, not for individual cases.
I'm only eating meat. There's nothing you can't get there from plants as well.
But if you personally are finding that your like ability to live is so hindered by not eating meat, is that would that within your framework of the non-aggression principle allow someone to go and start eating meat?
I mean, it depends how far you go. Like if you can't,
It all depends on how someone hashes out the non-aggression principle, right? Because there's lots of different ways you can hash that out, and you know, some of them are going to entail things that are more strict than others. So
if you had a person who couldn't physically have a level of like health that is sustainable from eating a vegan diet, and that they're literally getting like progressively less healthy, of course, like I would say that person is justified in eating meat. But I think that, you know, I don't know if that person exists, and if they do, it's going to be an extremely small amount of people. For most people, like with a well-planned vegan diet, you can be like perfectly healthy. and there's no reason, there's nothing you're gonna need or that you require from getting.
How do you feel about animals that are carnivores?
Well,
I really wish that he would have backed up that claim with actual empirical evidence, because he was making an empirical claim, and he didn't provide any evidence. He's actually made a few empirical claims, and thus far presented no evidence. So that's not very ideal. And then also, secondly, I wish he would press her more on her position on why she doesn't go through whatever extra effort she has to in order to make sure she's eating a well-planned vegan diet in order to avoid causing all of this absolutely horrific harm to innocent victims, right? So I wish he would press her on that. He's probably going to get distracted, though, by this whole lions thing. We'll see, though. I don't know.
They're totally justifying being carnivores because, like, they have to do that to survive, right? So just like the point that you just made there, like, for a carnivorous animal, like a lion or something, that has to eat meat, it can't go and eat plants, like, of course it's justified in killing other animals. That isn't actually the case for humans, right? Because,
okay.
like...
So the problem that I would have with this argument, I kind of see where you're going. So you'll allow some people to kill other creatures to live if they have to. And then others, if you're like omnivore, you can make eating vegetables and whatnot an option, then you have to pick that because we want to reduce harm. But I think that have to is where the...
Well, that's referring to a moral obligation, right? Like, we would have a moral obligation to do so. So, like, what I would want to know is if she considers it a moral obligation in the case of humans, right? Where she would say, oh yeah, like, I can't kill and eat humans just because it gives me pleasure. Then what is it that is true of the animals that if it were true of the humans would cause you to have that same attitude towards them? What trait exists in the animals that doesn't exist in the humans which would justify that differential attitude that you have? That's what I want to know. I wish you would ask her that.
The question is, because you could probably put a cat or a dog on a vegan diet, but they're not going to be very happy. You could probably keep them alive, but the quality of life is going to be pretty damn low. Right?
Evidence. That's an empirical claim. I'd like to see the evidence for it, right? Like, I've looked, not deeply, but I've spent a significant amount of time reading various peer-reviewed literature regarding the health of cats and dogs, and I have never seen any convincing evidence that cats and dogs eating a vegan diet have any differential health outcomes which would cause them to have a lower quality of life, right? So, yeah, data please, like, where's the evidence for that claim? I really hope he presses her on that.
Right?
Well, I mean, a cat, like, that's an interesting question. So, like, I've looked into this specifically, and, like, I would not recommend anyone puts a cat on a vegan diet. I'm pretty sure cats are obligate carnivores, and if...
Why? Again, like, what evidence do you have that, like, cats can't thrive on a vegan diet? Like, the evidence I've seen indicates that they can. That they don't have differential health outcomes which would cause them to have a poor quality of life compared to a non-vegan diet. So, again, I'd like to know, what is it, like, what evidence has convinced you of that position?
If you try to go on a vegan diet, like, they're going to have, like, health issues. They're probably going to die. Like, with dogs, you can actually feed dogs a vegan diet. Like, there's plenty of, like, vegan dog foods out there. Dogs can do perfectly.
There's plenty of vegan cat foods out there, too. And the same is true. Like, at least based on the data that I've seen. And you know what? I'll link it below, right? So check the description. You're going to find links to peer-reviewed resources looking at the cats and dogs consuming vegan diets. And yeah, and you guys can tell me if I'm missing something. Like, if I'm missing a major study or something that, like, implies otherwise, then please, by all means, critique me, let me know. I am always about having my position be as correct as possible. I greatly value truth. That's something I really value, and that, you know, is part of my brand. And so, yeah, if you guys have notice anything at all, like besides just cats and dogs, anything at all I say that's wrong, like please critique me on it. Like I'm always looking for critiques. Thank you.
Defining it, you know, obviously whether they like it, whether they prefer me, you know, it's unlikely you're gonna get a dog that's gonna you know, for instance, love it so much that if you put a piece of steak in front of them, like, oh no, I'm happy with the plants. Like, you're not going to turn it like ideologically vegan, but you could keep a dog totally healthy on a vegan diet. And
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, dogs, as far as we can tell, can't take philosophical positions like veganism, right? Like a dog isn't going to be a theist or a non-theist. Like they just simply don't take positions like that, as near as we can tell. And so when you're determining like a philosophical position, like yeah, of course the dog isn't going to take that position. When we say the dog is vegan, or we say that the dog is eating a vegan diet, all we're talking about is a completely plant-based diet, right? Like it's the same diet that a vegan would eat, right? But it's, you know, to be clear, there are some definitions, like the most commonly found definition you'll find in dictionaries describing veganism will normally describe it as a dietary thing, but it's and or a lifestyle thing, but it's definitely not. And I have a whole video about the definition of veganism that you guys can watch. I'll link it in a YouTube card at the top. Please check it out. Thank you.
It's been done like most vegans, if they've got dogs, will have them vegan. If they've got cats, will not have them vegan because cats are opposite carnivores.
Okay, he said most vegans, so again, evidence, like where's the evidence that most vegans would not feed their cat vegan cat food? I'm not convinced of that. Like in my experience, the majority of the vegans that I have spoken to, as near as I can tell, that have a cat, do feed their cat vegan cat food, and the ones that I've come across that don't are seriously considering it. So yeah, I'm definitely not convinced that most vegans would not feed their cat vegan cat food, and I'd like to see the evidence for that, and he probably doesn't have any, so I would just encourage him to not make that claim, and maybe, you know, maybe like I did, talk about most of the vegans that you have come across, right? Like that's not a claim I'm going to dispute because it's not empirical. I mean, maybe it is to a certain degree, right? But like I'm not going to be expecting empirical evidence for that claim.
I don't know, man. I feel like since the dawn of time, humans have been partaking in this natural cycle with animals of hunting.
Oh my god. She's like hitting off like every single like level 0 vegan argument that, like, you know, and she even said, like, you know, I just feel like you can tell she hasn't thought this thoroughly through before the debate, which is unfortunate, you know. She didn't bother to go like figure out like what the most common vegan arguments are, what the most common vegan responses to non-vegan arguments are. Like none of that. You can clearly tell she's winging this, like, and that's why we're hearing, oh, but taste though, but lions though, you know, like, and what was the most recent one that she just did? I forgot it already. Oh yeah, but tradition though, but you know, been doing for a long time though. Like it's just like so basic, dude. Like come on. Since when does doing something for a long time have any bearing on, or whether or not it's a tradition, have any bearing on whether or not that action can be morally justified, right? Like, it's just silly.
I don't know, man. I feel like since the dawn of time, humans have been partaking in
the
this
dawn
natural
of
cycle
time
with animals of hunting, eating, killing. I agree that like factory.
Guess what? Since the dawn of time, we've also been raping each other and murdering each other, right? Like, who cares how long we've been doing it? Like, let's talk about whether or not it can be morally justified.
Farming, I think, is not natural.
Yeah,
It's
agree.
horrible. The way that we're treating animals. I will always, this is something I can attest to, I'll always buy free-range eggs. I don't want to eat some depressed-ass chicken eggs, you know?
So this is how you know she's definitely never looked into, like, animal agriculture to understand, like, what it actually looks like. For example, like, free-range farms, like, you can see those on Dominion. They look like absolute shitholes. Like they're horrendous, and the animals live just as horrifically as they did. Like they might have a door open that they can access during certain times of the day where they can walk outside, but most of the chickens aren't even going to be able to reach the door because of the massive amount of chickens in the way, right? Like it's really silly. It's really silly. And it's unfortunate that she didn't do her research before this debate. Like, I mean, definitely that would have been appreciated. Presumably this vegan guy knows the animal agriculture industry, so I would expect him, I would hope that he would push back on that. We'll see, I guess.
I don't want to be eating depressed meat either.
Yeah.
If I could just have happy, healthy animals that we hunted in our own community, you know, good shot, they don't suffer, they get to live a full life, I think that is ideal. But I still do...
Ideal. Okay, would you say that it's ideal in the case of humans? Would you say that it's even morally justified in the case of humans? Probably not. And if the answer is no, then again, what is it that is true of the animals that if it were true of the humans would justify you having that same moral attitude towards them? I really want to know that. I really wish that Jonny would ask her that.
I think the idea of eating meat and having that a part of our diet has been something humans have done since the dawn of time, and we have developed to do that. Our teeth, our bodies, our bones, all of this is developed for hunting, to be part of this natural cycle.
Okay, and even if it was, again, who cares? Like, what... Like, you could say that we were naturally developed to murder and rape each other, you know, right? Like, it's a very natural thing that's been going on forever, right? And just because it's natural, right, just because we've been evolved to do so, doesn't make it morally justified. Like, we really need to talk about the moral justification.
And to change that, because of this non-aggression principle that no other creature within the natural cycle adheres to.
If we're going to talk about what creatures in the natural cycle adhere to, I mean, that comes with all sorts of silly reductios. Like, animals rape each other all the time. Like, animals murder each other all the time. Like, lions have been known to, like, murder the young of their competition. They've been, you know, known to sexually assault each other. And, like, this is common in, like, all animals, right? Like, okay, I won't say all animals, but like the vast majority of mammals, like you're going to find this to be the case, and there's a lot of avians that this is going to be the case as well. I mean, yeah, if you want to base your morality on the behavior of wild animals, that's just going to come with all sorts of hilarious reductios, like absolutely hilarious. Like there's no way. So that's a poor argument. That's definitely not convincing.
Odd, and it's like we're trying to, I feel like so many people are trying to become more than what we actually are. It's kind of like the same with the gender stuff. Like, I can bend my gender, I can be a man, I can be a woman, I can be beyond what humans are naturally.
But the difference is with that kind of stuff, right, is that like if you try to not be your gender, you have to have some kind of physical intervention to do it. Like you're chopping off your genitals, or you're having like breasts implanted.
But I would consider veganism a physical.
Well, why? What change are you actually doing?
If I don't eat meat, my whole body changes. My whole mood. I literally have lower energy. I have.
But you just said that you'd never tried a vegan diet, so like how do you know?
No, but I'm saying if when I reduce my meat intake, when I eat more steak.
Sure, but this is all a matter of like learning what your diet is, right? So like, you know, most people when they first like decide to go vegan, they've got to learn a little bit about their nutrition and like what they need to actually take in to kind of replace that. But like most people like will find that they can kind of stay vegan if you stick with it and you kind of like just experiment a little bit with what it is.
He's trying to tell you very politely that you don't know what the you're talking about.
Difference though with this kind of stuff you're talking about, and I take the point, and I know that there is a there is kind of a suspicion that veganism is all part of this kind of transhumanist thing, and it's like, no, you know, we've got to go back to our nature, and that's what our nature's doing. But actually, like, there's no, for most people, like, when I went vegan, I understand that some people have some issues with it. When I went vegan, literally nothing changed. I didn't get bigger, I didn't get smaller, nothing changed, you know.
Yeah, that's not the case for me. Like, I went vegan and my health improved dramatically, so that was awesome. Like, I've been enjoying, like, way better health than I ever experienced on a non-vegan diet, and I'm really thankful for that. Like, I had no idea. Like, I had done zero research into vegan diets and health, so I didn't know that there was health benefits compared to your standard American diet, and I didn't know that there was differential health outcomes. I didn't know anything about that. Like, when I went vegan, I didn't even know what the word vegan meant. All I did was watch Earthlings, and it just completely floored me, like, absolutely rocked my world, and I was like, holy shit, I need to boycott that. And so I started boycotting animal agriculture, and yeah, that's how I went vegan. Like, it was later on, like, watching some vegan content on YouTube because it happened to appeal to my sensibilities, that I I think it was Earthling Ed, if I'm not mistaken, was explaining what veganism was, and or what a vegan was or something like that, and then I realized, I was like, oh, I'm a vegan, huh, alright then. And it, you know, I just became my identity. But, you know, for a long time, like, probably at least like a year, you know, maybe longer, you know, I was just boycotting animal agriculture. Like, I had no idea that veganism was even a thing. Like, I don't think I'd ever heard the term in my life. I knew about vegetarians, but not vegans.
I probably just
You did get a man bun, though.
I got a man bun, yeah. Actually, I think I had the man bun first.
Really? So, did the man bun make you a vegan, or did being vegan bring the man bun?
They just kind of go together, you know? You guys...
See, this is what happens when you're not pressing on, like, the main point. Like, the conversation just gets off into these weeds and stuff, you know? Like, I really want to know, like, how she justifies torturing and murdering innocent victims for pleasure. Like, it sounds like she's under the impression that she cannot due to health reasons, right? And he's trying to push back on that by claiming that, like, you just need to do more research and try it out. Yeah, I would, you know, I would not even ask her to do research, because, I mean, like, she's obviously well off. Like, she doesn't need to do the research herself. She just needs to talk to somebody who has done the research, right? So get a dietitian. Pay for a dietitian, a nice dietitian, to tell you how to eat a healthy, balanced vegan diet, and then try it, right? Like, I think a great question to ask her is, if you could be healthy on a vegan diet, would you consider it a moral obligation? Like, that's a great question. I wish you would ask her that.
Steps into that community. Being like a right-wing vegan, you got to do something. You got to throw him a bone.
Oh my gosh. I want to tell you the story of when I first shot an animal. I didn't want to. I was actually kind of leaning more towards your...
You were almost a vegan.
I was leaning towards your horrific, disgusting...
This YouTube channel, right, this could have been you just being like, hey guys, today I'm eating my acai bowl. But it's not.
I like acai bowls anyways, so
yeah,
there's that.
So.
Yeah. We ate them.
But that could have been you. That could have been you.
Could have been. Oh, horrific. But no, I was in South Africa, and I was offered a chance to kill I think it was called a bliss buck or something. It's like a little gazelle thing, right? Mm-hmm. And I said, no, I'm against trophy hunting. I will not do that.
Oh, it was a trophy hunting?
No, it wasn't. I just assumed it was, okay. Right? I'm like, that's just a beautiful animal. I don't want to kill it. And they were so offended. They were like, what are you talking about? This is like a great honor. And not only is it a great honor, but you're going to be helping the community, because what's happened is because of real trophy hunters, natural predators have been killed off in this area. So the population of a lot of these, grass grazing animals and everything has just blown up, and what happens is they'll eat all of the grass and all of the food and all the water, and their population blows up and they'll starve to death. And there's this mass horrific event where they all just will die if the population isn't culled. And also the marsupials and everything, they'll all die off, and it'll just send the whole thing out of whack. So we have to cull them.
What about humans, though? Right? The reason I acted so ironically to this is not because, who cares about animals starving to death? No, obviously that matters. But the reason I'm acting like this is because this is already the case with humans, by all means. Like, when we move into new habitats, when we procure portions of land to utilize for our own purposes, we massacre everything that was there before. Like, there's nothing left. Like, and yeah, plenty of animals will starve to death by virtue of a lack of food or a place to stay. Or sorry, not and a place to stay. But yeah, I mean, like, would you consider it morally justified to kill humans in order to protect the environment and the harms that are caused to it? And if not, again, what is it that is true of the animals that if it were true of the humans would justify you having that same attitude? I really, really wish you would press her on her morals, and he's really not, which is disappointing. And it looks like the debate doesn't have that much longer, so I'm starting to lose hope that he will.
Population to reduce harm. So in a sense, and then they're also like, okay, and also the meat is used to feed the local community here that have troubles with nutrition and getting enough food. So it's like, I look at that, and I'm like, that whole process is harm reduction.
Well, I mean...
Yeah, by that same virtue, murdering humans to prevent their progression into different areas and feeding those dead humans to, you know, people that need food or whatever, like, that would be causing this, like, similar benefits, right? Like, again, I'd like to know what the morally relevant difference between the two is that causes that differential in attitude. And the reason I ask that is because a lot of non-vegans, when you press them on this, they either will fall into an inconsistency, they logically contradict themselves, which is hilarious, or two, they come up with a position that's just absolutely ridiculous. Like, it's hilarious. Like, I think that most non-vegans would not agree with the types of positions that most vegans have to take in order to take a logically consistent stance against veganism.
The fact is, like, the reason that you have these issues with, like, overpopulation in the first place is normally because people have gone in and they've hunted all of the predators in the first place, and that's why you then throw things out of balance. So hunting caused the problem in the first place, and I don't think that sustaining hunting forever and saying, okay, well, we've got to hunt forever now because we've now got to continue to solve the problem we've caused, like, eternally.
Yeah, but objectively, more hunting does solve it. Like, objectively.
Right, but my answer to a problem like that, like, if you've basically killed off all the predators and you've got a situation where you have a population which doesn't have a natural predator, it's to reintroduce
the humans are the predators we've reintroduced, and we allow ourselves to get more food and nutrients in the process in a way that reduces harm.
Sure, but, like, again, my ethical framework is such that, like, humans, because we don't need to hunt in the first place, and we can actually just sustain ourselves and be perfectly healthy from not killing, that reintroducing the predators and having that ecosystem balance out naturally according to the natural world, i.e. before we went in there and hunted the predators to extinction in the first place, is a better way of dealing with that problem.
But we are a part of the natural world. We are animals ourselves, partaking as predators in this environment, and we are the reintroduced natural predators that are rebalancing things.
Okay, but here's something to think about, because you said before about, you know, like, the idea that, like, veganism is kind of unnatural and it's a diversion from our natural way of doing things. But I would say, like, when you see humans going out and hunting, you know, we're not talking about kind of going in and saying, okay, we've got these big claws and these big teeth, we're going to go and chase down an animal. You know, you're going in there with camouflage, you're going in there with guns that shoot very high range, you're putting your eye to a scope so you can see an animal. Like, all of this stuff is not, like, anything like when you have a wolf or something that's actually just...
Yes, but you know what? Guess which one reduces more harm? Would you rather be shot in the head or mauled to death slowly by a grizzly bear?
Well, I mean...
I'd rather be left the fuck alone. That's what I would rather be.
Would I rather be... Yeah, probably would rather be shot to death, but, you know, you're assuming as well, first of all, that humans are just going to make a straight shot and it's going to immediately kill an animal, which, you know, that might happen sometimes, but...
A good hunter will. I did miss my first shot when I killed mine, and we had to search for hours and hours. It was horrible.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Well, I didn't miss it. I was actually very, very close, but yeah, it was...
But again, like, I don't spend too much time kind of saying, okay, well, if a, like, bear, like, what a bear does or whatever, like, I don't think that I think we're living in a kind of different realm of, like, moral responsibility. Like, what humans do, we shouldn't look at what animals do and say, okay, well, we should do this or that. Like, for me as a human, I say, okay, like, don't kill unless it's absolutely necessary, for instance, for self-defense or something like that. Like, for animals, they are in the animal world, they are obligate carnivores, some of them, obviously not all of them. If they need...
Yeah, you know, you said for self-defense or something like that. Like, I would want him to unpack that more, you know, like, for self-defense, okay, that's an example, but, like, I'd like that to be more fleshed out and more detailed.
To maul something, then that's part of their moral framework according to the necessity of that species. But it's not part of ours, so I treat them as two completely separate issues. Basically.
Again, necessity with respect to what exactly?
Well, I fully disagree with you, and shall continue to eat my bacon. But
I know, and you will continue to eat your pancakes, and I will continue to have to go elsewhere.
I do respect the fact that, unlike a lot of vegans out there, I don't see you, you know, I don't know, partaking in eco-terrorism, trying to burn down, you know, farming houses.
Yeah, and one more thing as well.
Wait a minute.
A lot of vegans out there, I don't see you, you know, I don't know, partaking in eco-terrorism, trying to burn down, you know, farming houses.
Yeah, and one more thing.
Like a lot of vegans out there, you're not participating in eco-terrorism and trying to burn down farmers' houses? Excuse me? Like, what exactly do you mean by a lot of vegans? And where are you? Yeah, I definitely like to see some evidence for that. Like, what do you mean by a lot? Or, you know, sorry, not evidence, but clarification by what you mean by a lot, right? Like, yeah, that sounds really silly to me. Like, I don't know, obviously, but I suspect that this is not the case. I have strong intuition that this is just a false claim. But that's going to depend on how she hashes out a lot, right? Like, that's why I need clarification on that.
Thing as well, you know, on the whole, like, you know, eating fake meats and stuff like that. Because I know this is a big thing. It's like,
it looks disgusting.
It does, it's not like healthy stuff, right? Like, you know, it's not that I'll never eat a Beyond Burger or an Impossible Burger. Like, you know, normally it's kind of like a lash. I know, but that's because you go to these places, right? But ideally, you know, you don't have to eat that stuff, and I wouldn't recommend that people do. You know, there's plenty of, like, you can eat a whole food plant-based diet, and it's perfectly good. So we can agree, like, on, you know, being against all of this stuff, and especially the bugs, right? Like, vegans are going to be the first. Vegans are going to be on that front line saying, no, we shouldn't be eating the bugs. Like,
I
there's a lot
thought
of things
this
that we
take
can
was
align on.
really interesting. We were talking about this the other day, and I was like, you just want us New World Order to eat the bugs. And he's like, absolutely not. He's like, that's so weird. What did you say? You were like, I actually think the New World Order want more suffering.
Yeah. That's a good point.
They want to commit, like, a genocide. Because how many bugs would you have to kill to make one hamburger?
Exactly, yeah. Like, imagine how many crickets you would have to replace a cow. So, like, if it's between the bugs and a cow, I'd say the cow's the more ethical choice. But obviously, if you've got the third option there of saying, you know, killing neither of those things, neither killing 10,000 bugs or a cow, that's the most ethical option, right?
Interesting. This is also, like, potentially a very... Are you pro-life?
Yeah, I actually...
Because, like,
this question, I'd say I pretty much am.
If you think a bug is, like, sentient enough to not hurt, wouldn't a...
That's not something I understand. When people say stuff like sentient enough or more sentient or less sentient, like that is completely gibberish to me. I understand sentience to be like having a subjective experience, you know, the property of being a conscious psychological center of one's own experience, right? That's a binary trait. Like, you're not going to be more or less having an experience. You either are having an experience or you are not having an experience. The richness of that experience, you know, the diversity and the intensity of the experience might vary, but that doesn't change the fact that an experience is occurring, and that's what sentient means, is that a subjective experience is occurring. So that doesn't make sense to me. Yeah.
So this is a good question. I've been thinking about this a lot recently because I had a big argument with a vegan kind of. He's like an academic, and he's really he's basically kind of like pro-choice, but he's an ardent vegan, and I do see that there is some hypocrisy between those two ideas, right? So, like, I would say that I'm pro-life. However, I think that I don't think that at the point of conception something is sentient enough for us to necessarily kind of ascribe it rights.
Yeah, so he's still saying sentient enough. Like, that implies that there is somehow more or less of an experience occurring, which just doesn't make sense to me. Like, the experience itself can be varied in intensity, in richness, in diversity, in what have you. But that doesn't mean that the experience is more experience or less experience, right? Like, a subjective experience either is or is not occurring. It's a binary trait.
But I think that it's probably very, very early on, way earlier on than probably most of mainstream science thinks. You know, like it's probably a matter of days. You know, but I don't know. I could be convinced.
A matter of days? Yeah, I seriously doubt that. I don't think there's any evidence out there that a fetus that's only a few days old has reached sentience. I mean, yeah. I definitely would need to see the evidence for that in order to be convinced.
On that, I think that I have a lot of respect or kind of like appreciation for the pro-life arguments, and I actually think that pro-lifers and vegans have a lot more in common than they would necessarily admit. Yeah.
Well, Johnny, I have to tell you, out of all of the mental disorders of progressivism, I respect yours the most.
Thank you very much.
That's another thing that, thank you very much. Like, I can't believe you didn't press her on that. Like, mental disorder, as if being vegan was a mental disorder. Like, what an absolutely trash, like, impetuous, idiotic comment to make with absolutely no evidence to back it up whatsoever, right? Like, I would not accept that. I would definitely be like, what the are you talking about? How is taking a philosophical position against torturing and murdering, exploiting innocent victims, when one can absolutely by all means divest from doing so and still live a thriving and healthy life? Like, yeah. Triggered just a little bit.
I appreciate that. Glowing report.
You do a podcast. Where can people go and find your little rants and bants?
Yeah, my podcast is called the Staying Free Podcast. It's on Spotify, it's on iTunes, it's on all those kind of places. The Twitter handle for that is Staying Free Pod. So yeah, go check it out. I haven't actually done an episode on veganism. Most of the stuff is on libertarianism and ethics and philosophy and that kind of stuff. So, your audience will probably like it. I will sneak a vegan episode in there at some point, but it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah. For the most part, I decided to, grill him on the one thing that we'd have the most disagreement on. But for the most part, he's a pretty cool libertarian. It's all right. It's all right. He's done good work on this film.
She considers that grilling him, guys. I think that's funny. He did not get grilled, but okay. You just kind of talked about how you felt and, like, presented a bunch of level 0 vegan arguments. But yeah, sure. You grilled him.
I'll put all the links to his channel down below in the description. Oh, what's your Twitter, by the way? Isn't it?
Jonny Hodl.
Jonny Hodl.
Yeah.
As in like Hodl Bitcoin.
Hodl is like Bitcoin. Yeah, I'm also a Bitcoiner, which is another thing we could talk about. But
literally every libertarian stereotype possible, just to the extreme. But anyways, this was fun. I enjoyed this.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate you.
I bet she did enjoy it.
Talk about this, and we have a lot. Like you said, we have.
He didn't bother to press her on, like, the moral issue, like, of veganism. So yeah, she probably felt very accepted and very nice, but she also didn't have her beliefs challenged enough to rethink them and reconsider them. Like, she's like, oh yeah, definitely still gonna eat bacon. And I mean, like, the way that she said it doesn't give me the impression that she's going to consider this anymore, right? Based on what he said. So yeah, I really wish that he would have held his own more in the debate. Yeah.
On a lot of common ground, and we can disagree on some areas. So.
Absolutely. All right. Have a good one, everybody, and thanks for tuning in.
Well, that was altogether disappointing and lackluster. I mean, I'm happy. I'm happy that it happened. Anytime that a huge YouTuber with a bunch of subscribers brings up veganism, I think that's great. Veganism needs more attention like this. And so, yeah, I'd definitely like to see that. More often. Because the more people consider veganism, the more people think about veganism, the faster we're going to get society to be on board with a plant-based society. And once we can get a more plant-based society, then it's going to be a lot easier to get people on board with a vegan society. And so, no, I'm not promoting, what is it called? I forget what it's called, but the notion that like you're going to progressively like, oh yeah, well if you feel like you can't go vegan now, then just cut back on your animal products, and that's gonna be good enough for now. Like, I don't take that position. The animals need us to change as soon as possible, but realistically, I do not expect society to just switch to a vegan society. Like, that would take a miracle in my eyes. I expect society is going to go plant-based, and then after they go plant-based, I think they're going to accept the morals of veganism as a whole, and by that time, people are going to look back and say, what the hell were we thinking? So, all right, cool beans. So that is Debating a Vegan About His Disorder, Lauren Southern. It was exactly like I thought. He didn't even press her on the fact that veganism is a philosophical position regarding the rights of sentient beings, and not a mental disorder by any definition of a mental disorder that we would accept in the medical literature. So yeah, ridiculous. Now this debate, excuse me, this debate is going to be a little more tough to get through. It's not going to be as clean and clear, but we're going to do what we can. This is the Nutrivore Field Trip number 2, Appoota versus Samir Dossani on ethics of animal agriculture. So let's go.
Yeah, I think it's recording on my end. So, yeah. If you want to record on your side, that's fine too.
I don't know if I have permission to record, but you can just share the recording. Listen, it's been difficult enough to get this going.
Now recording.
You can share the recording with me once it's done, yeah?
It's Craig.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, great. So, where do you want to start?
No, you tell me, what would you like me to do? You want me to sort of give an outline of... I mean, first of all... Okay, let me do this. So, I think there are... Sorry, do you mind if I make an intervention first?
No, not at all. You could do that.
Okay, so...
Looks like we have an ad. Right off the bat. Let's get that skip button, YouTube. Oh, come on, YouTube. Where's that skip button? I definitely don't want to watch the entire 1 minute and 24 seconds that's left on this thing. Thank you. Sorry guys that my computer is so slow. One day I'll have a better computer. My sister's been talking about giving me a better computer, but she hasn't actually done it. So.
Okay, so I think there are... The scope of this debate is potentially far too wide. I think there's too many things that we could... If anyone is having trouble hearing me, please let me know in the chat, and I will stop and get it sorted. But I'm just going to continue speaking, assuming that it's going okay? So,
yeah, sure. Let you do that.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, when having this debate, I've had this debate now a few times with a few different vegan groups, and the thing that I want to clarify just at the start is that we are talking about at least 3 different food systems, at least. Okay, so there's one food system that I think we can all agree, and I always like to start at a point of complete agreement. And I think the point of complete agreement is that the current food system as it currently exists is a terrible way to do it, is immoral, is unethical, treats animals badly, treats farmers badly, treats everyone badly. I think everyone sort of agrees at that much level, right? So there's one part of the discussion we'll have, which is a critique of the current food system, on which you and I will agree with, we'll agree a lot of the time. Okay? Fine. There is a second discussion about some alternative food system, call it a plant-based food system, for lack of a better word, that would be what, I don't know you, so I'm making suppositions. I presume that some vegan is imagining that in some future world there could be something like a plant-based food system which would be better than the current food system. That's the assumption. And that's when, after having this debate for many times over the years, remember I've been doing this since 1995, first as a vegan.
I mean, food systems are just one aspect of veganism, and granted they are maybe the most, okay, not maybe, I would say they are the most salient aspect of veganism. It definitely doesn't encompass what veganism is, right? Like, you could torture and murder a dog that you find on the street that's a stray dog or something, right? And that would be a non-vegan action, but it has nothing to do with the food system, right? And so veganism is essentially about animal rights. It's about, or rather, the rights of sentient beings, with animals as a proxy. So I feel like he's somewhat missing the point. I understand that it's the most salient aspect of veganism, but it's definitely not all-encompassing, and it doesn't touch the heart of what veganism is, in my opinion.
That's the assumption, right? Then what I would argue for is a different kind of model. So the vegans tend to argue from the point of view of there's a meat-based food system and there's a plant-based food system, and if we only got rid of the meat-based food system, then things would be better. I say that's not really how the world works. And in an ideal world, we would no longer have, the dichotomy I like to refer to is industrial agriculture as opposed to sustainable agriculture or agroecology or
Sustainability, regenerability, all of this has nothing to do with the rights of sentient beings. So if we're talking about rights of sentient beings that are being violated, I mean, that's going to be what veganism is about. It's not about, whether or not this is more environmentally friendly, whether or not this is sustainable, whether or not it's regenerative, blah, blah, blah.
With agriculture, sometimes I use these words interchangeably, although they're kind of not exactly the same, and I can talk about the difference if you like. But that future food system is what I am mostly alluding to when I make my arguments. So the problem is, when I'm alluding to some future arguments, or you're alluding to some future arguments, I cannot refute that with data from the current food system.
Future arguments? Yeah, it's not even clear what he's talking about when he's talking about future arguments. Like, I think he's talking about hypotheticals where we consumed only plant-based foods around the world, right? And yeah, we can appeal to the data in order to determine what that would be like, because there's plenty of data regarding that topic, and it's very robust. So you would need to grapple with that. Like, there's no reason that you couldn't refer to the data for that.
I just want to sort of put that out there, that we're talking about at least 3 different models. So there is like a current system, which we all agree sucks. There is your future vision of a food system, and there is my future vision of a food. Does that make sense, just as a starting point?
And let me guess, your future vision of a food system involves murdering sentient beings, am I right? Oh, we got an ad, folks. Sorry.
Yeah, sure. There are probably like a few things, but yeah, I think that makes sense. Like on.
Here we go. Didn't get the skip button till the very end.
yeah, I think that makes sense, like on the net.
Fantastic. So, where do you want to go from here? I mean, should I talk? I can go on to elucidate my critiques of the current food system and why I propose that there should be a regenerative or an agroecological food system, if you like. Or, I mean, I've spoken for 5 minutes now. You can have a go if you like.
I really hope that what he does is press him on what veganism really is and what is entailed by it, and why that is not solely related to the agriculture system, why that's not solely related to how we procure food. And then I wish he would press him on the moral aspect of veganism, and then see what his position is and why it allows for the rights violations of sentient beings to occur.
Oh, I would just get straight into the dialogue, right? So, whatever food system you're proposing, if it's going to include non-human animals, right, on the receiving end of some, putative rights violations, if they're going to be on the receiving end of that, then I'm going to take an objection to that, regardless of what system you're going to, propose, right?
So let's
Based.
yeah.
Yeah.
So let's stick. So I see where you're starting from. So let's stick to the current food system, right? So is it your contention that there is a certain form of agriculture that exists right now, called it plant-based agriculture, that doesn't exploit animals?
Well, currently there. I mean, there's a logical possibility. Like you could envision like.
So you're talking about the future? No, I'm not talking about the future. Leave that future vision aside for a second.
Yeah, right now.
I'm not sure. I think there are some plant systems that don't involve exploitation of animals, but I'm not certain. I think most of them probably don't. There might be like aquaponics and stuff like that doesn't involve animal exploitation. Like, I don't see any problem with that being an example of plant-based agriculture that doesn't involve animal exploitation. But granted, it's not the most common.
No,
Low.
there is no. The world is not a vegan place, so there is no such system right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not convinced.
There's no such system, right? So whether you buy dal or you buy rice or you buy bread or you buy beef at the store, you are still part of a system that exploits animals. You agree?
Yeah.
Yeah, to some extent, yeah.
Okay. And why? And so when we look into the details of why that's the case, particularly, right? We can look to agriculture, right? So I'm an anthropologist by training. I'm finishing my PhD this year in anthropology. The story is, and it's a story that I'm refuting in my PhD thesis, but this is the standard thinking, is that 10,000 years ago, humans started to create agriculture, and animal agriculture was a part of it. There's no such thing as plant and animal agriculture. It all happened together, and it had to happen together because without animals, the system basically dies in a couple of years, like 2 or 3 years. With animals, the system dies in 300 years. So it's a bad agriculture, in my opinion.
That sounds like gibberish. I mean, what the hell is he talking about? And once I figure that out, I'd like to know what the evidence for that is. But, like, it's not even clear what the hell he's talking about. Like, with animals, it dies in a certain number of years, and without animals, it dies in a certain number of years. Like, that sounds like gibberish. Yeah. Definitely we need that fleshed out.
At least the way that it's done traditionally since 10,000 years, is not a very good way for humans to get food at all. And I would prefer something called permaculture or agroecology or whatever you like, right? Whenever you have an agricultural system, whenever you put soil in the ground, you are killing animals. You are killing millions of microbes, small animals at the level of protozoa and so on. And today, when we're talking about industrial agriculture, you're killing mice, you're killing whatever it is, insects, you're killing whatever eats the plants, etc., etc. This is all necessary to produce anything, right?
Okay. So, obviously this dude does not understand the definition of veganism as I understand it. Yeah. Microorganisms, as near as we can tell, are not sentient, and therefore, why would we extend them any moral consideration? Like, the things that we care about, like the capacity to experience suffering and pleasure and things like that, are extensions, or rather, are properties of sentience. So, yeah, veganism is about the rights of sentient beings, or rather, extending rights to sentient beings, right? And so, yeah, he's bringing up some silliness. I'd like to see that addressed. He's right about, yeah, we do have to consider the animals in crops. However, if that is something you care about, you're going to reduce that by going vegan compared to going non-vegan, because we're producing crops to feed the animals, and they get fed for their entire lives before they get murdered. And so most of that food gets converted into heat and, heat and manure, poop. So, yeah. It's definitely non-efficient. That's hence the existence of conversion ratios. And for those of you that don't know, conversion ratios are essentially ratios that you look at determining how much food goes into an animal versus how much you get out of it. And you're going to, out of the process. And you're going to have different levels of that depending on the animal and the system and whatnot. But, yeah.
So when we talk about agriculture that doesn't exploit animals, there's no such thing, right? Especially when we bring fertilizer into the equation, because as we all know, 99.9%, I mean, I've met with some vegan permaculturists, God bless their souls, but they're like 0.01% of the agricultural systems, little tiny projects in Germany. Like, that's not happening, right? So in the current world that we currently live in, 99.99% of fertilizer is produced either by animals, by manure, or by fossil fuels. Right? And given that choice...
Yeah, I agree. And, fossil fuels, at least compared to using manure from animal agriculture, does not violate as many rights of sentient beings, and is therefore the more morally appropriate decision. Morally appropriate decision. And on top of that, the difference is so dramatic that, on my view, it would be a moral obligation.
I'm definitely going to choose the animals. Right? I'm not a fan of fossil fuels. So this is the world in which we currently live. Now you're telling me that in some future world it may be possible to not quote unquote exploit animals in the future, right? And
yeah, I think that gets away from the point of veganism, right? Like, veganism is a stance about the rights of sentient beings, and so the question is if you're not extending them rights, why not? It seems like his reason for why not was something like, oh, I don't like fossil fuels, which is a really poor excuse, if you ask me, for committing rights violations to sentient beings. You're torturing and murdering sentient beings just to get fertilizer for your freaking ground. I mean, it's just... it's stupid, which is what I'll say because I'm on YouTube.
Telling you that maybe, but it's a bit like saying, yeah, we could live in Star Trek world and get food out of the replicators and so on. I mean, yeah, it's theoretically a possibility, and we all know that Einstein's laws sort of mean that energy and matter are sort of interchangeable on some level. But there's no way, that in my lifetime or in your lifetime or in our grandchildren's lifetime, that's going to be happening, right? So given what we currently know and what we don't know, my contention is that we should actually take an ecosystems management view of food production, which necessarily means that we see food systems as not distinct from ecosystems. And that therefore whatever food, so I happen to live here in the African savannah, there are lots of big game around here. There have been millions of buffalo that travel across the continent for migrations, etc., etc. There are other game, etc., etc. And actually, this is where humans first evolved. As far as we know, this is where the genus Homo sapiens sapien, or the species Homo sapiens sapien, rather, first evolved, not too far from where I'm speaking these words, right?
He's just missing the point of veganism, right? Like, he keeps talking about our food systems and ecological management, right? Like, this is not what veganism is concerned with. I mean, like, to a certain degree, it is concerned with food systems and ecological management, but it misses the core of what veganism is, which is extending rights to sentient beings. And so, yeah, I would definitely like that to be brought up and to see him pressed on that.
And they evolved, as again I can demonstrate through my anthropological work, they evolved through eating fatty meats, right? So the way that one should live in this ecosystem would be trying to find a way that is in line with the savanna, that is regenerating the savanna, and that, yes, includes plants and animals. Yeah? So that's my contention.
Yeah, so, well, I mean, just because there
That's not a contention. That's like just missing the point.
is a system that is not, I mean, just because you're part of a system that isn't optimal, it doesn't mean you should, I mean, contribute to a system that is also equally exploitative. Or you could say maybe not equally exploitative, but there are still rights violations happening and major rights violations happening.
So the rights violations bit, you're not going to get me on, right? Because if you look at the history of this concept of human rights, like, it is a very European concept. Not to say
Who cares? Like, what does that have to do with anything?
that other cultures didn't have it, but the concepts of human rights at an individual level, right, is something that exists in English law, in French law, etc. It's not something that exists in the cultures that I'm familiar with here in Southern Africa. For
Oh, I
example,
mean, I'm not.
Okay. Better question. Do you or do you not extend rights to sentient beings? If not, then why not? Right? Like, it sounds like he doesn't believe in rights, which is hilarious if that's the case.
Referring to legal rights. I'm not referring to legal human rights. I'm more
Okay.
alluding to deontic rights violations as opposed to legal rights violations. Like,
Right. I'd like to know, like, whether or not he extends rights to sentient beings, and if that's not the case, then, like, well, presumably that's going to come with a lot of hilarious reductios, but, yeah, we could talk about that another time.
you
So
know,
when a lion eats a buffalo, is the buffalo's rights being violated? Or when a buffalo spears a lion, is the lion's rights being violated?
when the buffalo does it, it's not because it's doing it in self-defense. But when the lion does it, yeah, I would say it's a right.
Oh no.
I'm not convinced of that. You know, I think it's still a rights violation if you're harming someone in self-defense. I just think it can be morally justified, right? Like, you're still violating that right that the person has, but because of other considerations, like the utility that's going to increase from there, we can we can morally justify actually committing these rights violations. That doesn't mean that the rights violation didn't occur, though. I know there's some weirdness around this where, like, some people think that, like, it's no longer a rights violation when you harm an individual or you kill them, as long as it can be morally justified, and I don't take that position. It doesn't really make sense to me. Like, a right is essentially a deontic rule that you apply, and so presumably if you are applying this to sentient beings, never mind, guys, I just lost my train of thought. My apologies.
What I've seen in the savannah, man. Buffaloes will, I mean, if they have the chance, they will kill baby lions for sure, right? Lions will kill baby leopards and not even eat them, right? So
Yeah, I mean,
is that
I
those
still
rights
don't think it's a
violations?
rights violation simply because of the fact that the lion is eventually the baby lion is eventually going to grow up and it's going to hunt other buffaloes. So I
So is it wrong for the lion to eat what its lion was designed to eat?
I mean, we could go into whether it's wrong to eat.
Got another ad. Looks like this guy is taking a some sort of creationist view. He's talking about the way that lions are designed. Like, I think it's interesting that he thinks lions are designed.
We could go into whether it's wrong to eat what's designed to eat. I mean,
But
I
you're
don't
saying it's a
think-
rights violation, man. So if it's a rights
Yeah.
violation, it must be wrong,
So,
right?
well, I mean, I don't necessarily buy the concept of whether they are designed to eat it or something. They just like evolved to eat it.
Yeah.
I don't buy these.
Sorry, you don't believe that they're designed to eat it, man? You don't believe there's such a thing as a carnivore?
You actually find that hilarious? Like, you find that funny? Yeah, he doesn't believe that they were designed, like, and you do apparently.
Carnivorous gut.
No, I don't believe in a creationist design, abiogenesis and stuff like that. I follow the law of evolution, the law of natural selection. That's what I believe in.
No, obviously, I mean, listen, man, we're not children. We're not creationists, right? We're not people who don't believe in evolution. Everything that I do is around evolution, obviously. Right?
Sure. Yeah.
Everything I do is around evolution. That just sounds like a gibberish sentence, but that aside, I mean, it sounds like this guy is not taking a creationist viewpoint, in which case, why would you use the word designed? Like, that, what a poor choice of words. Like, Jesus.
This is a presupposition. But the way you just frame things makes me think that you've seen a vegetarian lion. Have you ever seen a vegetarian lion?
Well, I mean, it's a logical possibility. I could just feed a lion like lab meat and it's going to be vegan.
Sorry, I'm sorry. You know nothing about it. Sorry. Let's.
Okay, this is just like removed from like the core of veganism. I mean, obviously veganism is concerned with animal rights, and like we're gonna have to wonder about how that applies to wild animals. And yeah, that's a consideration, that's a discussion to have. But I'd rather see this guy pressed on why he isn't vegan, why he doesn't accept a vegan or a plant-based agriculture system, despite the fact that it's going to dramatically reduce the rights that are inflicted on sentient beings. Like, I want to know about this kind of stuff. Like,
let's just agree that is not. I mean, unless you can agree that it is not possible to raise a vegetarian lion, we cannot have this discussion.
what?
So this is simply biology. This is you can talk to any
by
zoologist,
vegetarian,
any zookeeper.
Wait, by vegetarian do you mean like a herbivore?
What did he say exactly? Let me rewind it.
Sorry. Let's just agree that is not. I mean, unless you can agree that it is not possible to raise a vegetarian lion, we cannot have this discussion.
Unless you can agree that it's not possible to raise a vegetarian lion, then we cannot have this discussion. That it sounds ridiculous. Like, I mean, what? How would it be impossible to raise a vegetarian lion? Like, where's the logical impossibility? Please explain to me how that's impossible. Maybe he means physically impossible. I find that to be incredulous as well, right? Like, how is that physically impossible? What law of physics is it breaking? What law of logic is it breaking to have a vegetarian lion? I mean, like, yeah, that sounds silly to me.
This is simply biology. This is you can talk to any
by
zoologist,
vegetarian,
any zookeeper.
Wait, by vegetarian do you mean like a herbivorous lion?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
I don't see why that's necessary. You could just feed them lab meat, and you could. They might not be vegetarian. But
Yeah, and also talking about feeding them lab meat doesn't actually address the question that's on the table, right? Like, he asked about a vegetarian lion and whether or not you think it's possible to raise one. So claiming that you can feed the lion lab-based meat is just completely tangential.
So we're a sci-fi lion. Okay, fine. We're a sci-fi lion.
Sure.
Eating
Logical possibility.
Logical possibility, I suppose, but with lots of
What?
yeah.
I mean, it's not too far off either. Probably like the next.
It's never dude. If it happens, so
Are they talking about if lab meat happens? Like, lab meat already happened, dude. It already exists, and in some places in the world, it's reached price parity with with other regular meats. I can't remember which country it was that this happened in. It starts with an S. I'll leave a link down below where you guys can read more on that.
you don't understand, because this is where I really get impatient. If that happens, the buffalo dies. Do you understand that? Without the lion, without the predators, without the wolves, there's a paper that I can share with you.
So who cares? The outcomes of giving them a vegetarian diet is completely tangential to whether or not it's possible to raise them on a vegan diet. On a vegetarian diet, right? Like, whether or not it's possible has nothing to do with the health outcomes. Like, if the health outcomes are terrible and they all wind up dying, that doesn't mean it's not possible. It just means the health outcomes are bad.
Showing that what killed the buffalo in Europe, this is an argument, it's not an established fact, but this guy's got a lot of...
I suspect that it's not an argument, but go ahead.
He's got a lot of things going for him. What he claims is that the extinction of the buffalo in North America did not happen just because the Europeans hunted buffalo. They did, but there are far too many of them to be wiped out. What the Europeans were able to wipe out was the wolves. And when you wipe out the wolf, you kill the buffalo. The buffalo needs its predator as much as the predator needs the buffalo. Why? Because without the predator pressure, the cows or the buffalo or whatever, they stay in the same place and they overgraze their area, their habitat. There's no pressure to move through, to do those big migrations that we see the wildebeest do.
Got another ad. While this ad is playing, let me just go ahead and plug my stuff. So y'all, if you like reacting to vegan content, if you like content which encourages people, hey sweetie, I'm doing a video. Can't have you in here right now. Nope. Okay. Sorry for that interruption, guys. Back to the video.
Move through to do those big migrations that we see the wildebeest doing even today in Africa. They overgraze their area and they starve to death. It is a horrible, horrible death, right? So predators are what keeps the herbivores alive. This is what we know.
Yeah, sure, but you're assuming that we are never going to interfere in wildlife, right?
No, sorry. What does interfere with wildlife mean? We are wildlife, man. We are part of these systems.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like this is just removed from what I wish the discussion was centered around, which is animal rights. Like, we keep getting off into the weeds with this stuff, and I'd like to see the discussion more focused.
Yeah, sure, but I mean, what I mean by interference in wildlife is that you prevent rights violations by, you at least don't let the buffaloes get eaten alive by the lions, and you don't let the buffaloes starve to death by overgrazing and stuff like that, right? So you could, it's not like a.
Yeah, but what you're describing is things that we do not yet fully understand, and when we try to replicate those natural systems, we screw up. Let me give you an example of how we screw up.
Sure, but that's a non sequitur, right? Just because we screw up today doesn't mean we will screw up tomorrow.
Well, I mean, at what point does this become? I mean, is this some fantasy world? Like in 1,000 years, we can all become vegan? Is that what we're talking about, or are we talking about practical solutions today?
Yeah, I mean, well. We could, that's going to happen eventually.
Practical solutions to what exactly? I feel like this guy's obsessed with the environmental harms and the environment in general when it comes to veganism, whereas veganism itself is not concerned with the environment. It is only concerned with the environment in so much as the environment involves the right violations of sentient beings, right? So... Again, I wish we would center this discussion, focus it around the rights of sentient beings, and specifically why this individual is choosing to not extend them those rights, and whether or not that justification is, let's just say a good one, in my eyes, which is going to be determined by A, being aligned with my preferences, and B, being convincing to what I believe will be convincing to the majority of people.
I mean, whether we go vegan,
Are you? Sorry, you just said you were a man of science. You believe in evolution. Do you believe in fortune telling? Can you tell me what's going to happen eventually?
No, I don't believe in fortune telling, and I'm not.
So right, so let's.
Either. I'm just hoping that people would realize that it's wrong to kill animals.
That's fun.
So if it's wrong to kill animals, I just have to point out again, you should not eat a single grain of dal, right? The person who we should be listening to is Mahavir Jain, who said, don't eat, take milk. He was a big fan of milk.
Oh my God.
And he was also a fan of eating fruit that had fallen off the tree. You never even disturb the tree in order to get the fruit.
No, he's going full fruitarian on us. No, I'm just kidding. But like, no, this is ridiculousness. Like, the milk is one of the most unethical products that you can purchase from the market. I mean, the dairy industry is absolutely horrific. Like, it's arguably worse than traditional animal agriculture with respect to meats and things like that. So, yeah. Again, not touching the heart of what I understand veganism to be.
Right?
Wait, I mean, that would be a nirvana fallacy, right? Just because you can't, you can't eliminate 100% of the suffering doesn't mean you should not, go approach towards 90
I
or
take your point.
99%.
But what I'm telling you is that your Dal is killing far more people, far more animals, if you like, far more creatures, far more sentient beings, because a spade is touching dirt. Like an infinite number more. We're talking
What? I thought we already went over this. Like, microbiota are not sentient. At least we don't have any good evidence to suggest that.
billions than my grass-fed beef, right? My grass-fed beef is killing one animal, and I'm going to visit the farm, and I'm making sure that their spade is not...
We got another ad. Come on, skip button. Let's go. Yeah, anyways. I was doing a plug earlier. If you like reactions to vegan content, if you like content that makes people think more critically, then please subscribe. Please drop a comment down below, drop me a like. All these things really help the algorithm to show my content to more people. And hop in my Discord. I'll have a link to all of this below. So I'd really appreciate if you guys would hook up with my content. And also, you can find me on Twitter as well. My handle is not ParadymShift Art anymore, like it shows in this little thing. Instead, it's ParadymShift Veg, V-E-G. So, back to the video.
Beef is killing one animal, and I'm going to visit the farm, and I'm making sure that their spade is not touching the dirt.
Yeah,
they don't do any of that.
That's fine, but
Yeah.
when you look at it, so
Well, I mean, every time a cow steps anywhere, it's going to be killing microbiota. I mean, like, if you're only concerned with animals that are being killed, I mean, like, yeah, you're still killing animals. Like, I think it's silly, though. It's a silly thing to consider. Like, we care about whether or not the animal is sentient, right? Like, why would I care if someone kills a sponge? Like, seriously.
it depends on what you value. Do you value what do you value, say, in a being? So what I value is sentience. I don't know what you value. And I've seen
It sounds like he values the animalness in question, which is hilarious. Like, the animalness doesn't track what we actually care about, as near as I can tell. And again, I have a whole video about the definition of veganism where I go deep into all of this, and please check that out. I added it to the YouTube card up at the top. So, yeah, I'd love it for you guys to check it out. Give me some feedback if you don't mind.
Your debate with the other guy, the sentientist guy.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of sentientism as an over-encompassing normative ethic. That's not what I.
That's interesting because you told me what you value is the property of being sentient, yet you reject a sentientist position. I mean, why is that? Like, I definitely like some clarity there. Sounds like you're taking a sentientist position and then saying you reject sentientism, which just doesn't make sense to me.
where I come from is a threshold deontic system, right? So where I value rights violations to the point where there is a significant utility change, right? So even if you say that a spade touches the soil and it kills like a billion protozoans, right? Now there's no definitive evidence supporting that the protozoans are sentient, and even if they are, they're going to be infinitely less sentient than, say, a cow or a buffalo. And
See, there it is again. More or less sentient. That doesn't make any sense to me. How can something either be more or less having an experience? Like, it either is having, like, the subject in question either is having an experience or is not having an experience. A subjective experience, right? And that is what determines sentience. So, yeah. Again, this is nonsensical to me. Sentience is binary, as near as I can tell. I mean, it's clear what they're trying to talk about is something like the richness of the experience, or like the diversity or intensity of the experience, right? But I wish they would just say so. Like, instead of talking about more or less sentient, like, that just, again, makes no sense to me by virtue of sentience being binary, on my view.
I would rather, in the utility calculus, I would view it wrong to kill one buffalo over like billions or trillions of protozoans.
Yeah, I think it's a very strange way of looking at the world, this whole sentience argument.
He thinks it's strange when he values not killing microorganisms, but valuing sentient beings is strange, right? Like, individuals that clearly, like, very obviously experience suffering and pleasure and emotions, right? Like, we value these sort of things, but no. The weird position is not that. It's, I mean, excuse me. The weird position, according to his view, is that, rather than believing that you should be extending rights to non-sentient beings like protozoa in the soil. Like, I just find that hilarious.
So, listen, I can't defend an approach that I don't believe in. I can only point out that it's inconsistent, right? So I think your approach is inconsistent. That guy's approach was also inconsistent. What I think is
What? What do you mean? Inconsistent how? Like, show me the two propositions that make the contradiction. I bet that's BS. I bet that's complete BS. And what does he say to that? Sure? Why would you just accept that there's inconsistency on your view?
That guy's approach was also inconsistent.
If you think it's an
Sure, he says.
if you think there's an inconsistency, I would like.
I'll tell you what the inconsistency is.
Oh, okay, hell yeah. He's asking him to derive the contradiction. Like, let's hear that.
What the inconsistency is, well, I can easily turn around and say, well, my life is way more important. It's infinitely more important than the cow's life, right? Which is exactly the argument that you don't want to hear, right? Because
That's not an inconsistency. Try again.
You're putting ranks on sentience. You're saying
no, but
this is a protozoa, this is an ant, this is a mouse, this is a cow, this is a human, this is an elephant, etc. I don't know what your scale is, but you're positing some kind of scale. And all I'm telling you is that if you're positing some kind of scale, you're doing exactly what Descartes does. You're doing exactly what the Cartesians do. You're doing exactly what the meat eaters do, which is to posit that there's something called an automaton, which is an animal in the Cartesian view, and there's something called a soul, which is a human. And this is all like way out of date 18th century science that Descartes didn't even believe. I know all what I'm saying, but this is the worldview which vegans rally against and say no, it's not just that animals are automatons. Animals also have a soul, which I completely agree with. Animals have a soul. Vegetables have a soul. The earth itself has a soul. Like, this is all true. And
what? Animals have a soul. Vegetables have a soul. The entire earth has a soul? What the hell is this guy even talking about? Like, it's not even clear what a soul is. Like, he would definitely need to define that for us. And then he would have to empirically demonstrate how and why a vegetable, an animal, and the entire earth actually have this property of having a soul.
I don't see how it's relevant to the discussion. It is relevant in the sense that
I don't
think
think
everything...
vegetables have souls.
Yeah,
It depends on how. I mean, how do you define a soul? I don't know how you're defining a soul.
Thank you for asking. We got another ad, yo. Aw, it's chickens. Keeping it bullshit free. Yeah, I doubt that. Maybe literally. Hit me with the double ads. Oh, snap. Alright, looks like we're back to the video. Maybe? Probably? It's trying. My computer's definitely thinking about it.
Yeah,
It depends on how. I mean, how do you define a soul? I don't know how you're defining a soul.
Thank you for asking. I'd
Well,
like to know
this
that
is the
too.
thing, is that soul is something that doesn't really have a definition in my view. So if you look at,
So it's gibberish. It's nonsense. It sounded like nonsense. It is nonsense. He doesn't even have a definition for that word, and yet he's using it. Like, ugh. This guy's killing me. And nothing he said demonstrated an inconsistency, right? Like, where is the logical contradiction? What propositions did your interlocutor affirm, Mr. Appoota, or however you say that? You know, what propositions did your interlocutor affirm that form the contradiction? Like, do pray tell.
and so when you ask me, if you ask me to put the word soul in my PhD thesis, I probably will not, unless I'm quoting one of my people that I've interviewed, right? The people that I interview believe that everything, absolutely everything in the world, from rocks to whatever, to plants, to animals, to humans, to the sky, has a soul. It has a...
And evidently you believe that too, because you asserted it in this conversation, right? So, yeah. But you're just asserting absolute gibberish. Like, this is the definition of nonsense. You don't even have a definition for the word that you're using. That makes your statement incoherent.
Way of being, it has a nature. Yeah, you can think of this as almost a Platonic ideal of what the creature is, like how it relates to humans, etc. So, you know, again, that's not a scientific concept, that's their concept, but it's a concept that I think is, you know, we can't prove that humans have souls. So if we're going to posit that humans...
How can we prove whether or not something has a soul if we can't even define the word soul? Like, Jesus. Obviously, you need to define it first before you can figure out whether or not a being possesses that trait. I mean, holy...
have souls, and say that animals, I can believe that animals also have souls, and I can believe that every living organism, including protozoa, have souls as well, right? So all I'm saying is whether it's the sentientist way...
And yet you can't define soul. Like, that just makes it just so much worse.
Or the utilitarian way that you're positing. There's all kinds of inconsistencies there.
Yeah, I mean, well, if you admitted that it's not a scientific view, right? So I don't
Soul?
think
No, I'm not defending that soul thing.
Yeah,
But
sure.
But the inverse of that is that nothing has a soul, right?
No, I mean, that's not necessary.
What the do you mean by soul? If you can't even define it, then how do you expect us to interact with your claims? Ugh.
necessarily the case. I mean, if you define soul as, I mean, there are multiple interpretations of what soul can be. I don't take the religious or like non-epistem, a non-Cartesian kind of view, but I would rather value sentience, because sentience is something at least that we know objectively exists, and we know.
I disagree completely.
I mean, we're not even sharing a definition of soul at this point, so I don't. You're giving in to his gibberish, my dude. You need to press him on this.
How can we define sentience? Define sentience for me.
Yeah, so sentience,
Not until you define soul. Define soul first. Stop using the term.
Like it's a set of traits. You could say.
Some of those traits.
Yeah. So some of the traits. So it's a set of traits, and the presence of those traits, it overdetermines that the being is sentient, right? So some of the traits are qualia, having a subjective experience, being able to perceive your surroundings, perceive yourself, self-awareness, being able to differentiate between pleasure and pain.
I don't take being able to differentiate. I don't take his view of sentience. On my view, sentience is having a subjective experience, right? And that's the only thing that sentience is. It's there's different ways to reiterate that, but that's what it means. You know, I don't think that having traits like being able to differentiate between pleasure and pain is a property that defines sentience. Like, I think it's a property that arises from sentience, but it doesn't define sentience.
More specifically, well-being and suffering. So
okay.
These are a few.
So what if I tell you that there's a single-celled organism that is well documented to have all of these things?
Oh, I'm sure there isn't.
There is. It's the slime mold, right? I mean, you can read the papers on slime mold and neuroscience, redefining neuroscience. It's amazing.
We gotta add. Yeah, it sounds like nonsense to me. It sounds like BS. I seriously doubt there are single-celled organisms that are sentient. Definitely would need to see the evidence for that. Waiting for the skip button. Come on, YouTube. There it is. Hit me with the YouTube survey. And we are back to the video, if it wants to load.
Slime mold, right? I mean, you can read the papers on slime mold and neuroscience, redefining neuroscience. It's amazing. It's an amazing creature that we don't begin to understand it. It only has one cell.
Wait,
right?
What family is the slime mold from?
You just go. I sent this on some discussion. Someone can repost. I'm not going to look it up right now. But there's a protozoa. Just Google the single-celled organism that's redefining neuroscience. I think that's the article.
Yeah. So I think I
redefining neuroscience. That sounds pretty vague and what's the word? Demagogic, right? Like, it sounds like something you'd expect from a news headline. And I seriously doubt that is the case. And even if it is the case, that doesn't determine that the individual in question is actually sentient. Like, your claim is that this individual possesses the traits of sentient. What's your evidence for that?
I think Korea here has posted that in the other server, but I mean, it's not. One sec. Let me see if that's the case. But in any case. There is a paper that came out in 2019 which said that any animal. Basically, it spoke about plants, but the conclusions are extrapolatable to any being, right? So there was a paper. I mean, if you want, I could, send it to you. One sec, I'll just post that.
Yeah, I mean, whatever. We can still send each other stuff later. But I mean, it's a fact that this organism, Stentor roselli, forms the sequence of decision making to avoid irritating stimuli. Right? That's the article that was published in 2019. There's many articles.
Right. So
on those organisms.
yeah. So the problem with that is that when you say that the organism is able to just reciprocate or respond to certain stimulus, that doesn't necessarily follow
That's exactly what you're doing with all of these extra things where you're hooking up an octopus to electrodes, etc. What do you think you're doing? You're getting that organism to respond to stimulus. This one does better than mice in certain tests, by the way. A single organism can find its food or whatever more quickly than a mouse can, for example. Can learn faster than a mouse, for example.
Right.
So
This dude is just conflating intelligence with sentience, right? Like, intelligence doesn't determine sentience. Like, my computer is intelligent. It responds to stimuli. I mentioned this in my definition of veganism's video. That does not entail that my computer is sentient. Like, having intelligence is not sufficient to be able to claim that an individual has sentience. They have to be having a subjective experience somehow.
All I'm saying is that we need to actually. I'm not saying that I know that this creature is sentient. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that
really, because it sounded like that's exactly what you said earlier. Because you said there is an individual or there is a being which possesses all of those traits, and one of those traits was having a subjective experience. That is what it means to be sentient. So that was your claim. Now you're taking that claim back. You're saying you do not claim that the being is sentient, right? So that's significant.
we do not know enough to say that this creature is not sentient.
Oh, I mean, that's what the table that I was
level
referring to. That's what I was saying. We do know enough to suggest that there is a certain rudimentary neural mechanism necessary, and in the absence of such a mechanism, it's impossible that the organism can host sentience.
Okay, I don't subscribe to that. Just because we can't know with 100% certainty doesn't mean we can't make the inference, right? Like, I think what he's referring... It sounds like what Samir Dossani is referring to is the fact that, like, we can't know with 100% certainty whether any individual is sentient, right? Like, presumably you would only know that about yourself because you have access to your own experience. But for every other person, for every other being, we can never know with absolute certainty that they are sentient. But I don't see how that matters, right? Like, we can't know a lot of things without absolute certainty. But that doesn't mean we can't make inferences. And that doesn't mean that those inferences aren't backed by convincing evidence, right? And this is absolutely the case with sentient animals. Or rather, whether or not animals are sentient. Or any individual in question. And it looks like Appoota does understand this and is getting into that, which I appreciate.
So I disagree with that. I mean, I've, you know, as a scientist and as
you're free to disagree, but you need to have certain.
So you can take a look at the studies that I'm citing. Right? This is something which
I think the study that I have cited, I think it also takes a look at a lot of other studies where.
Sure. I know the one you're talking about. There was a meta-analysis on species, etc., etc.
No, it's
hugely
problematic. That one. I'll just send it to you.
Okay. Another article. This brainless single-cell blob can make complex decisions. Right? A lot of stuff.
That's great. That doesn't entail sentience. Again, this guy is conflating intelligence with sentience.
Yeah, so just check your Ask a Vegan.
We got another ad, folks. Oh
Having
my
no more
god,
than
sorry,
1
we
square
have
foot of
double
space,
ads.
that's bull. Having lots of space, that.
My bad. I didn't realize we had 2 ads in a row, and so I unmuted it too early. Here we go.
Yeah, so just check your Ask a Vegan channel.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, I just sent you like the Sci-Hub link so that you don't have to look at the abstract.
Okay, so this is regarding plants. Yeah, so again, this is like it's based on a survey of brain anatomy, functional complexity, behaviors of a broad spectrum of animals. Criteria were established for the emergence of consciousness. So that sentence there tells me that this is inherently limited. Why is it inherently limited? Because this, first of all, this is 2019, it's already a couple of days old. Since 2019, what we have learned about the human brain fills thousands and thousands and thousands of pages. And most of it was completely unexpected.
And?
Right? So what I'm asking for is a level of intellectual humility here, that we may not fully understand everything that's going on.
Why should we have to? Again, if I can't infer sentience for anyone but myself because I don't know for 100% like certainty that anyone besides myself is sentient, does that just mean that I shouldn't extend rights to those other beings which I'm unable to determine with 100% certainty their sentience or not? No, of course not. We can infer that they're sentient based on what we know about the mechanisms that seem to give rise to sentience, coupled with the different reactions that we observe.
Make sense?
Yeah, I mean, you could send me papers that contradict that. That's we could discuss that. But the problem is that you. So here's an epistemic problem, right? You have beings that you are definitively sure are sentient, right? Cows, buffaloes.
No, I don't believe sentience is a concept. Either it's the same like a soul. Either everything's sentient or nothing.
Wait,
What?
What's the argument for?
First he says sentient isn't a concept. Then he says that everything is sentient or nothing is sentient. What the fuck is the argument for that?
That. Right? Cows, buffaloes.
No, I don't believe sentience is a concept. Either it's
I
the
don't
same like a
believe
soul. Either everything.
I don't believe sentience is a concept. Wow. Like, what does that even mean, dude? He first says, I don't believe sentience is a concept, and then I think in the same breath, he says, either everything is sentient or nothing is sentient, thereby using the concept that he apparently believes doesn't exist. Like, there's just so many levels of silliness.
Sentient or nothing.
Wait, what's the argument for that?
Yeah, I'd like to know that too.
Well,
Watch him not present an argument. Watch.
show me where does sentience stop and where does sentience begin? Like, if you,
Boom. Not an argument. Told you.
for example, Is a mollusk sentient, for example?
I mean, that's kind of the gray area where, I mean.
Exactly. People love.
Oh no! My buddy is not staying on point. Mr. Appoota is being distracted by his sophistry. He's not actually pressing him on that. You asked him for an argument. He definitely didn't give you an argument and then asked you to answer a question, right? Like, no, don't let that happen. Like, press him on that and ask him again for the argument until he either presents the argument or concedes that he doesn't have an argument for that claim.
I mean, vegans love to say that mollusks are a gray area, but they refuse to say that plants are a gray area.
No, they aren't, because I'll show you the symmetry.
I'll tell you why. So hold on a sec. Let me finish. You asked me a question.
Sure. Yeah.
So
Give me the argument. Yeah.
Oh, good.
So
Good. Yes. He asked you for an argument, and he just repeated that he's looking for an argument.
Yeah.
Let's hear the argument. Do pray tell.
Let me finish. You asked me a question.
Sure. Yeah.
So
Give me the argument. Yeah.
So plants, as we are now learning, this is science that is ongoing. These are papers that I'm discussing with my colleagues at universities right now. Plants communicate through mycelial networks that are barely understood. But when we look at them as a whole, they look a lot like a neural network. And they have invited neuroscientists in to study these. They have these new, you guys know what LiDAR and all these ways to image stuff under the ground. They have invited neuroscientists in to study the mycelial network of communication between plants and to understand, for example, why plants move in a certain way that they do. Plants do move, just not. Why plants may be sending certain hormones or certain signals across the mycelium. And the neuroscientists, the botanists were kind of stumped. But the neuroscientists have some idea as to why this may be the case, implying that it may be the case that the mycelial network functions as kind of a collective brain, right? Now, this is not something I can prove. This is something that is being discussed and debated and understood right now, this very second.
Yeah, buddy, that A is not an argument at all, and B is not an argument for your claim that either everything is sentient or nothing is sentient. Like, where is the argument for that dichotomy existing? Watch him get distracted again. I bet.
But it is something that at least allows for the possibility that there is another way of understanding the world than this binary, this is a sentient organism and this isn't. Right? To be honest, I first came to this view from veganism. Because I thought Descartes was full of shit, right? I thought Descartes saying that, animals...
Veganism definitely doesn't take the position that either everything is sentient or nothing is sentient. So saying that you came to there from veganism or by virtue of veganism sounds silly to me.
Are automatons. I thought that was complete nonsense. And I think that if you look at the way animals behave and the way humans behave exactly like animals, just slightly more complicated in different ways, right? So did you know when you shake someone's hands, you're going to touch your own body in the next 30 seconds? This is part of human reflex. So that person's scent becomes...
Yeah, definitely not convinced of that, but okay. You're going to? Like, it's just going to happen? It's entailed by shaking someone's hand? Like, that sounds nonsense. Sounds like nonsense.
Part of your scent, right? Dogs do similar things, right? So just to, I don't want to talk about humans, it gets too complicated too quickly, but you get my point. We are part of natural system, and trying to wall off one part of the natural system from the other, based on our current level of understanding, will always lead to an incomplete answer.
Well,
Right, so none of that was an argument for his claim. I'd like that to be pointed out, and for him to either present an argument for his claim or back off of the claim and admit that he has no argument for it.
I don't necessarily see that as a problem, right? So you could wall off certain areas where you don't have the epistemic certainty to make strong decisions. But where you have the epistemic certainty, you do make strong decisions in those areas.
Yeah, so even the concept of epistemic certainty. So
I like his response, other than the fact that it completely ignores that he is not providing an argument for his claim, which is what was asked of him.
Let me ask you a question. Do you know what percentage? So a while ago, I believe it was Science Magazine, Nature Magazine, they did a study, sort of a meta-analysis, but a different idea. The idea was to replicate, so some of the main findings of the past 10 years, so this, I think this was 2018. So between 2008 and 2018, they tried to replicate 100 of the main findings, of the main established scientific findings. What percentage of them do you think they were able to replicate?
I mean, you could just tell me.
15.
And now we're just off into the weeds again. Sorry for the ad, guys. Now we're just off into the weeds again, where he's not providing an argument. He's not backing up his claim. And the conversation in general has just drifted from the position of animal rights and why he doesn't extend rights to other animals. The most we've gotten so far was something like, I don't like fossil
you
fuels.
could just tell me.
15. 15, right? So in other words, 15% of what had been established in the last 10 years could be replicated. It could pass the even basic litmus test of anything like the scientific method, right? So given that our own knowledge is so weak and limited,
that doesn't
do you think
entail
that's
that our knowledge is
conclusions
weak and limited.
about-
Like, obviously it's limited, but like weak, I mean that's a weird claim. Like, I definitely like to know what he means by that and how that's the case, right?
very important things, like food systems. This things that we do need a decision. This is where, as a nutritionist, also it's a little bit frustrating because there are lots of diets that can meet the needs of human nutrition, and but I have to tell my clients what to put in their mouths every day, or if they ask me, I have to give them an opinion. You see what I mean? So it's the same with science. It's like we can't prove much right now, to be perfectly honest, but we need to make decisions about how to structure our life. So that's why I tend to take an ancestral approach. An approach of this is how we know it was done in a sustainable way for 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 years.
See, he's going back to sustainability again. I feel like he's missing the point of veganism, which is about extending rights to sentient beings. And I really wish that Mr. Appoota here would push him on that. Mr. Expert Vegan Stuff.
And if we can, and we also know that it's been unsustainable for the past, whenever you want to start, 200 to 500 years. And the way that we can make it more sustainable is by trying to replicate the pre-colonial systems, right?
Careful with your mic there.
And try to make those food systems. Of course, there will be problems with demand and supply and population and blah, blah, blah. I mean, those are real problems. I don't mean to gloss over them. But they are technical problems that have technical answers, which can be solved, in my opinion, within an ecosystems management approach. Make sense?
Yeah, sure, but I mean, it still strays way farther from what I'm talking about, right? So, I mean, I'll just ask you this. So, on your current moral view, do you think humans have moral values?
Yeah, of course.
Right? Yeah. So, presumably, if there was like this human, if someone was just going around hunting humans and eating them, you would have a problem with that, right? You wouldn't. Yeah. So, but on your current moral view, you hold the view that it's okay to do the same thing to like a buffalo, like. Right?
I can feel it. I can feel it, guys. I can feel it. I'm so glad. It's like my wishes have been answered. Like, he went back to what I wish the discussion was about, and he's pressing him on it. Like, I love this. This is great. You can tell he's setting up NTT right now. Oh, for those of you that aren't aware, NTT stands for Name the Trait. People call it a vegan argument. I consider it a consistency check. but it does contain an argument inside of it. But anyways, in this consistency check, we're essentially checking to see whether or not someone is being consistent in their values with respect to veganism. And I discussed it a little bit earlier. It's where, like, the question I keep asking, what is it that is true of the animals that if it were true of the humans would justify said individual or individual X in having a differential attitude where it's okay to kill one and not the other for food, right? Or any other purpose. And so that is the setup of the argument. And if you guys would, it's commonly known among both vegans and non-vegans as being an undefeatable vegan argument. And what they mean by that is when you are presented with Name the Trait, you basically have to bite the bullet on some absolutely hilarious, like, reductios, or you end up logically contradicting yourself by rejecting them, and then you wind up in a contradiction, which is even more hilarious, right? So that's why it's considered the undefeatable vegan argument. And if anyone would like to learn more about Name the Trait and how they can run it and how to use it in your vegan argumentation, hit me up on Discord. My handle is ParadymShift vegan #3608 spelled just like my name is spelled. And yeah, just let me know. I might even make a video on it one day. But yeah, I'm so glad that he's running Name the Trait. This is awesome.
Yeah, it depends. It depends on the consistent,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that every time a buffalo is hunted, it's ethical. No, I wouldn't say that. But I would say
yeah, we could have it your way. Let's just like.
There are ethical ways to eat animals. Yes, if that's what you're trying to get me to say, absolutely.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I agree too. But
so
that's...
in that situation, like whatever.
And I would go one step further and say there's no ethical way to grow wheat. There's no ethical way to grow rice.
Well, why?
Because you're killing millions of creatures. You're destroying ecosystems. You're making, when you take a patch of land and make that land only suit human.
When he says millions, he's presumably referring to plants and protozoa and stuff like that. Like, again, why should we care? Okay, he obviously takes this view that everything is sentient, right? Like, that must be something to do with his idea that everything has a soul. Like, he has some really weird views. I see why someone gave him the clown trophy in the chat.
You're destroying countless creatures. You can't even begin to count. And anyone who's kept a garden knows this.
Wait, I don't see why that's problematic, right?
It's huge. I mean, it's incredibly problematic, right? So when you're killing the snails, when you're killing the bugs, when you're killing the insects, when you're killing the mice, when you're killing the birds,
you could have a system that doesn't do that. You made a universally quantified statement that there is no way to do it for wheat, but there's a way to ethically hunt animals, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
there may be ways. So not wheat, not rice, maybe.
I mean any plants. I mean, you could say that you could say X plant, right? You could say if you make a universally quantified statement that there is no ethical way to grow like an X crop, right? I could show you.
So let me modify my statement. Let me modify my statement and say this: there's the only way to ethically grow vegetables would be within the context of an. Let me put it that way. If you have a vegetable, so if I'm growing a vegetable that's not part of an ecosystem, it is almost by definition unethical.
Right, but I mean,
what is he talking about? That like, this must be related to his weird view that everything is either sentient or nothing is sentient. Like, which would be strange too, because if nothing is sentient, then he's even taking the position that he isn't sentient, right? Like, what an absolutely batshit position to take.
Yeah, I'll just get back to the question I was going to ask you, right? So, you think that it is permissible to like shoot a buffalo or something in some cases? Do you agree with that?
Sure.
We gotta add, yo. So yeah, this debate has been a little bit, it's been a little bit chaotic. They've gone off into the weeds more times than I would like, but he's bringing it right back, and I really appreciate that. I've appreciated most of Appoota's responses. I see why Nick shared this. This is kind of cool. By the way, everyone should go subscribe to Nick's content, the Nutrivore. All the links will be in the description below.
In some cases. Do you agree with that?
Sure.
Yeah. So what do you... it is permissible to like shoot a buffalo or something in some cases. Do you agree with that?
Sure.
Yeah. So
even I agree with that, right? Like we can come up with cases where it's morally justified to shoot and kill just about any an individual, right? Like what if you don't shoot and kill them, then like entire nations or entire planets worth of sentient life is going to be tortured and murdered, right? Like that's a great reason to morally justify shooting an individual, right?
do you think is true of the buffalo, which if true of a random human, it would make it okay for you to shoot the random human?
So this is why did you do?
Just hit him with the name the trait. You just did it. That's name the trait. NTT in his house.
Equivalences, man. Like.
No, I'm not
buffalo
equal. By the way, I'll just clarify. This is not an equivocation. I'm not saying they are equal.
What are you trying to say?
But what I'm saying is, like, there are certain traits that the buffalo possesses, and there are certain traits the human possesses, right? So if we just alter the traits of the human to match that of a buffalo, hypothetically speaking, there would be.
So this is like saying,
you can.
Yeah, sure.
He said you can't do that. He said.
Yeah, I mean it's just a consistency test.
Come on.
No, it's not. It is if you think that there is some kind of consistency. It's like saying, would it be okay for a buffalo to hunt a lion if it's a lion? Yeah, I suppose so. And if but lions don't hunt other lions either, right? If it's
alter the traits of the human to match.
Okay, something happened here. I'm trying to fix it. Somehow I popped it down into this mini player while I was trying to pause it. And now, I don't know why. I'm trying to put it full screen again. There we go. Alright, now it seems to be rewinding indefinitely.
That of a buffalo, hypothetically speaking.
no,
there would be.
So this is like saying I can turn myself in partial. Yeah, sure. But what the hell does that mean then?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean it's just a consistency test.
Holy cow, computer. You're really getting on my nerves. Okay. He said you can't do that. Like, yes, you can. Like, he was just positing a hypothetical situation where you've taken the traits that are in a human and you've altered them to match those of a buffalo such that your moral attitude would be the same in that it's okay to kill them for food. Right? So, you can do that. And there was something else he said. If it wants to load for me.
Turn myself in partial. Yeah, sure. But what the hell does that mean then? Like,
yeah, I mean it's just a consistency test.
Yeah, it is a consistency test, and all he has to do is answer the question, and we can get to checking his consistency. But so far, he's not answering, so.
No, it's not. It is if you think that there is some kind of consistency. It's like saying, would it be okay for a buffalo to hunt a lion if it's a lion?
Oh yeah, I remember. He said, what if I turned into a Martian, right? Like, that's not interacting with the hypothetical. He's not saying we have a human and they're transmogrifying to match the traits of the animal. That's a common misconception about name the trait. Like, there is no, changing of the individual in question that happens. We're just talking about a hypothetical scenario where there is an individual which does possess the traits of the animals in a case of a human, such that it causes that differential in attitude. And you can choose human as a trait. Like, the fact that they're not human, right? Like, that can be one of the traits that gets applied to the human. And in that case, you have a trait equalized human, which is no longer human, right? So, like, that's not impossible.
Yeah, I suppose so. You know, and if you know, but lions don't hunt other lions either, right? If the buffalo looked like a lion and a lion looked, would be okay for.
Yeah. So he this is simply a confusion on his part about name the trait. He's talking about actually like converting or like transforming one being into another, and that's not what name the trait is doing. It's just presenting a hypothetical where we've changed the traits of what would normally be a human to match, and it might still be a human depending on which traits have been chosen, to match those of the animal, such that whoever the individual is in question, that we're our interlocutor, whether or not he would consider it morally justified to murder and kill that individual.
I suppose so. You're asking me a nonsensical question, you get a nonsensical answer. Listen, there are different species have evolved in different ways, right? We are part of natural ecosystem.
I really wish that expert vegan stud Appoota here would press him on that, on the fact that he's misunderstanding name the trait, and get back to the point.
Yeah, I mean,
we are very top predators.
That's
we
fine.
evolved to be extremely top predators in natural ecosystems.
I mean, that's still a non sequitur.
So if you're trying to, no, it's not a non sequitur, Glenn. It's not a non sequitur because
whether it's a non sequitur or not, let's get back to the fact that he hasn't answered your question. He's called it nonsensical, and he hasn't provided an argument for that. And he's misunderstanding what name the trait is doing. So all of this needs to be clarified so we can move forward. And I really wish it would.
You're asking me what's the difference between a human and a buffalo? I'm asking you what's the difference between a human. It's exactly the same question.
A human and a who?
Lion.
I mean,
right?
There isn't, right? There isn't anything that is morally salient.
Sorry?
Yeah, I mean, there isn't anything that is morally salient.
Yeah, what he's trying to say is that, like, as a vegan, your answer to the name the trait main question is going to be no, there is no trait that justifies the difference in attitude, which is precisely why I don't have that difference in attitude. So that's why you can't really name the trait somebody who's vegan in the same way that you would normally name the trait somebody who is non-vegan.
There are like differences, like there might be differences between you and me. Like, I have short hair, you probably have long hair, you are taller, I'm shorter, that's possible. But I don't think those are morally salient traits.
So you're telling me that I can act like a lion if I want, so I can cut.
No, that's not what I'm telling you.
Let me rewind it again and see if the audio fixes. I think it might have been Discord, not
I can act
me.
like a lion if I want, so I can cut.
Yeah, he cut out on Discord.
No, that's not what I'm telling you. My question is that there is, on your current mall view, a possible inconsistency. So when you say it's okay to do something to a buffalo but not okay to do it to the human, there is a possible inconsistency, which I'm trying to, dissect.
So listen, so if you wanna really, this is stuff that I haven't articulated, articulated based on a model that I don't no longer 100% believe in, just to put that caveat out. But if you want me to articulate this, I'll articulate it this way, that if you take a Chomskyan view of what it means to be human, right? To be human means to possess certain language capabilities. We don't know if other animals do or not. But with the language comes the possibility of morality. And without the language, so that's the animal world, there is no possibility of morality to begin with, right? So, and morality tends to...
Are you talking about whether or not an individual in question could be considered a moral agent? And you're claiming that language is the differential property there? Okay, that's kind of weird, but A, it doesn't answer the question, and B... Wait, what was B? I forgot what B was. Sorry. Yeah, I wish you would answer the question. Like...
When we talk about morality within species, so the way that...
Or maybe charitably we can interpret it that he's saying that morality doesn't even begin. Maybe he's not talking about whether or not the individual in question can be considered a moral agent, but instead he's talking about whether or not the individual in question can be considered a moral patient, in which case it sounds like he is answering the question. And if that is what he's answering, then I would consider that to come with some hilarious reductios, right? If having language is the property that determines whether or not the individual in question is a moral patient, then that would entail, for example, like those that are mentally disabled such that they are incapable of language, that it would be completely fine to just torture and murder them because they're not moral patients, right? Like, what a silly position to take if that's what he's saying. And that's charitably interpreting his position. Like, uncharitably, it sounds like he's saying that perhaps... Actually, maybe that wouldn't be an uncharitable interpretation of his position, but the other interpretation that I can see would be interpreting that he's saying that the individual in question either is or is not a moral agent by virtue of language, which is also very silly, because that's going to come with similar reductios where we don't consider someone a moral agent because they're lacking language despite possessing the traits that we would normally associate with a moral agent, and I don't see how that makes someone a non-moral agent, or not a moral agent. Excuse me.
For example, dolphins are a good example.
All right, I just wanted to apologize for this interruption. It's now a different time than when I was recording, so everybody's sleeping, so I'm going to have to be a little quieter, and I turned the volume down a little bit, so you guys might want to turn it up if it's not, excuse me, if the volume's not equalized when you go to listen to it back on YouTube. So anyways, let's get back into this. I might be in a different mood than before. I might say different things than before, so I'm going to finish reacting to this like I did before. It got cut off by my computer as I saved it, which seems to happen far too often. If it wants to load for me. Oh man, I apologize for having a computer that's so slow. I didn't expect it to take this long to play.
Dolphins have a very complex social hierarchical, we'll call it moral structure or whatever. It's very difficult to understand, and it's being studied right now. That's how they relate with one another in their pods and their groups. That's how they relate with different dolphins. That is not how they relate with the fish that they hunt, right? So So positing interspecies morality as like.
Yeah, but if you're going to base your morality on the behavior of wild animals, that's going to come with all sorts of hilarious reductios. Right. Like wild animals, they'll sexually assault each other. Like they're known to do they're known to murder each other. They're known to do all sorts of horrific things. Like why would we want to base our morality on the actions of wild animals, right? My computer's really struggling this time.
Is given that vegans tend to do, and naturally say, oh, why are you killing cows or whatever. There's no equivalency there, and it makes me mad. It makes me
Yeah, sure.
go there.
Yeah, so hear me out. So I think
I mean, it's not clear to me what he's saying when he's getting mad there. Like, there's no equivalency. He says, it's name the trait is not drawing an equivalency. Like, that's not what's occurring. I think there seems to be a clear misunderstanding of what name the trait is doing, and I really hope that Appoota clears that up for him. Man, computer's extra slow right now. They noticed we were being quiet and they decided to be sleepy on us, I guess. Usually right about when I think, oh, I need to re-record this is like when it starts playing again.
one of the answers that I was expecting was, sorry, I'm not expecting, like detecting from whatever you said was language capability, right? So do you think language capability is the trait that differentiates them? Is that what you're talking about? I'm sorry.
I think there's a certain, as far as we know, so again, this is necessarily currently 100%, but as far as we know, there's no other biological system that uses language in the way that
that doesn't answer
sure.
the question.
So, I mean, but do you think it's a morally salient trait? Do you think having language capability...
Yes, 100%. No, being able to read, being able to write, being able to teach complex...
That grants a being moral status? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. And why do I say that? Because we have examples of don't have language.
Okay, so he just clarified right now that it's granting an individual moral status is what the trait in question is supposed to differentiate to. So that means that he's going to have to bite the bullet on like individuals that don't have language that we would normally extend rights to and consider it justified to murder them, right? Like, it's going to be a rather horrific view. I mean, just for example, imagine a mentally disabled human that like lacks the capacity for language. Like, that person would meet the criteria presented for excuse me, for a sufficiency in considering the subject a moral patient on his view, as he just affirmed. So, yikes. Let's see where he goes from here. Every time I pause it, it just takes its sweet time.
Didn't function as moral beings.
Yeah, sure. So,
case,
I mean, I could take like a person who is deaf mute and probably doesn't have arms and feet, whatever, right? They are incapable of language. Or let's say someone who is autistic or mentally disabled, some person like that, they don't have language capability. Do you think it's okay to shoot them if you find them in the wild?
No, man. Again, these are such ridiculous questions, man.
So he answered no, and then he rejected it on the basis of it being ridiculous. But that's, A, like, that doesn't interact with the critique, and B, like, that's just hilarious, right? Like, he basically just affirmed a contradiction on his view. Like, there's no way this guy is an advanced logic teacher, man. Like, there's no way. It's taking its sweet time again. Let's go, YouTube. Please.
So, what I'm telling you is that without those people who didn't grow up with language are not moral beings. But I am still a moral being. Right?
Okay.
My morals are what tell me not to shoot. So you're asking.
Let's see here. Okay, sorry about that interruption, guys, but I just fixed the problem on my end with the lag. So, well, in a way, and so the audio from now on is going to be perfect, except for any issues that are in the original recording. So, if there's any problems with Discord, like that were in the original recording, those are going to obviously still be there, but there's going to be no more issues on my end with my computer being crushed under the weight of recording. So
so what I'm telling you is that without those people who didn't grow up with language are not moral beings. But I am still a moral being, right? My morals are what tell me not to shoot. So you're asking me the question in the wrong.
So now it sounds like he's positing that he was referring to whether or not an agent is a moral, or excuse me, whether or not an individual is a moral agent in question, when he was talking about the trait differential, in which case it would be not answering the question, right? Because we weren't asking about moral agency, we were asking about moral patiency. About the property of being a moral patient. So
Wait, would it be acceptable if that person accidentally killed someone? I am still a moral being, right? My morals are what tell me not to shoot. So
yeah,
you're asking me.
And so if that was his answer, then I would just still want to know what the answer to the question is, right? Like, what is the trait that causes the differential attitudes, such that you would kill them in the case of the non-humans, but you wouldn't in the case of the human?
Question in the wrong way. Would it be acceptable if that person accidentally killed someone, assumably that they didn't know?
No,
what
that's not the question at all.
They killed someone.
What I'm trying.
But that is the question. That is the only relevant question.
No, that's not
because
the question I'm talking to. So, see, the point of asking this question is that if you say
you're trying to equate the human.
Yeah, he doesn't seem to be tracking the conversation as near as I can tell.
With the cow again, and you're not going to get me to equate a human. Never going. I spent far too much time around cows. They are not the equivalent of humans.
See, he's talking about equating humans and cows, right? Like, that's just misunderstanding what Name the Trait is doing. So, I get the feeling that Appoota understands Name the Trait fairly well, so I'm hoping he just clears that up.
See, the question I'm trying to ask you is that now the problem here is that if you say that language capability is a morally salient trait and you grant moral status based on that, right? But you say no, even if someone doesn't possess, if a human doesn't possess language capability.
Now, I don't know if anyone has, or excuse me, I don't know if I've already mentioned this or not previously in the video, because a lot of what I said got cut out, like I said, from the original video when I saved it. But every time he uses the word salient, morally salient, it doesn't, I mean, maybe there's just a definition of salient that I'm not aware of. But salient, as I understand it, means something that like stands out, you know. And so it's a strange way it's a strange term if what he's trying to say there is that there's sufficient moral justification such that he wouldn't consider it, he would or wouldn't consider it morally justified to take the action. So. I think that's a little bit strange, the language he's using, and I don't know if that's hindering the communication at all.
But you're assuming... No, of course not. But that's because of my moral. It's nothing to do with that person.
I mean, obviously.
So you haven't taken my moral... You haven't taken my moral capacity away from me. You've taken moral capacity away from the person.
I'm not changing anything about you or about...
But my morals still say I'm perfectly entitled to kill as many cows with my hands on. That's still not relevant. So you're not giving me a relevant... I used to, listen man, I have a degree in, I can tell you how to construct a thought experiment. You're doing it wrong. This is not the relevant thought experiment.
No. He cut out, but he said he has a degree in moral philosophy, which, you know, I don't know. I kind of doubt based on his responses. I also doubt that he's an advanced logic teacher based on his responses. Because he doesn't seem to, like, be able to track simple arguments. Like, I wish I could... you know what, I'll just not say anything in case it comes up, and if it does, then I just don't want to spoil what's coming up if I... yeah.
See,
in case it hasn't come up yet.
That even, I mean, I'm holding all your morals intact, right? And I'm simply changing the traits of the human to match the traits of...
But the human is still a human. The human has not transmogrified into a cow.
Yeah, therefore, see, he's still talking about, like, transmogrification and, like, you know, which is not what Name the Trait is doing. And so, like, I hope that Appoota can just clarify that.
Treat humans is how I must treat humans.
Let's say they do.
No, let's not say that they do. Let's instead... Let's actually, hang on. Sorry, we had an ad there.
I'm simply changing the traits of the human to match the traits of...
But the human is still a human. The human has not transmogrified into...
It's not as I understand Name the Trait the way that it should go. Like, we're not actually transforming one being into another. We're just taking the traits that are true of the animals, such that one would consider it justified to have that same differential attitude if you were to make those traits true of the human. And you can choose, I might have mentioned this already, but you can choose not being human as the trait. Like, that's completely possible. And, you know, and so when you trait equalize the new hypothetical being, you would just, you know, entail that they weren't human by whatever definition of human that we were using. And that would, you know, definitely need clarification as well, though, because sometimes people have strange definitions of human.
Therefore, how I treat humans is how I must treat humans.
Let's say they do.
No, if they transmogrify into a cow, then of course I can eat cows.
Yeah, let's not say they transmogrify, please, because that's as I understand it, like it's just kind of a weird construal that doesn't actually encapsulate what Name the Trait is doing.
No. You're not. Wait. when I asked you what's the difference, you said language capability is one of the differences. It doesn't have to be only the only difference. You said it's one
Sure.
of the differences, right? So
Yeah.
I simply subtracted language capability from.
See, but now he's agreeing that that the language art trait was one of the traits that was, on his view, what justified the difference in attitude according to the question that was asked him. He's affirming that now. So then it makes it sound like he was talking about the property being a moral patient when he was talking about whether or not there was morality with language. Like, that's why it's important to clear up things like that with people, because people won't be clear.
Human, and I asked you whether the human possesses moral value at this point on your current moral view, and you said yes, they still do possess moral value on your view. Now, the problem with that is it would lead you into a logical contradiction because you
No,
asserted
you do not understand what you're talking about, my friend. It is no.
moral value on your view. Now, the problem with that is it would lead you into a logical.
Let's see how he
I asked
explains
you
it. Let me go back
whether the
again.
human possesses moral value at this point on your current moral view, and you said yes, they still do possess moral value on your view. Now, the problem with that is it would lead you into a logical contradiction. You said it's one
Sure.
of the differences, right? So I simply subtracted language capability from a human, and I asked you whether the human possesses moral value at this point on your current moral view, and you said yes, they still do possess
Precisely.
moral value on your view. Now, the problem with that is it would lead you into a logical contradiction.
Yes,
Because you asserted
I completely agree with that. Yeah, and the fact that he says that he doesn't understand what he's talking about just further affirms to me that he probably is not a teacher of advanced logic, right? Because I only know like a few basics about logic, and even that is clear to me, right? So he's just affirmed a contradiction on his view, because what he has said is that, because the question that was asked of him is, what is it that is, like, I can't recall the exact words, but it was right along the same lines. It was what is it that is true of what is it that is true of the animals that if it were true of the humans would cause you to have the difference in attitude where it's okay to kill them in one case but not the other. He asked that, and he double checked with him to make sure that language was one of them, and now he learned that language was just one of them. And then when he gave him a being that like matched that criteria, he said no. And so maybe what's really happening is there's other criteria that he hasn't explained or hasn't put on the table that are interacting with it, because he did say that it was only one of the reasons that he would consider a person to have the property of being a moral patient. Or at least that seems to be what he was saying.
It is no contradiction. If I see
there is a
someone
contradiction,
who is
and I can show
disabled-
you the premises that form the contradiction.
But he is affirming a contradiction if he is saying that like language is the sufficiency the sufficient trait, which was what if he was answering the question. So unfortunately, to charitably interpret his response, we'd have to assume that he was answering the question. And if he was answering the question, then what he was trying to say is that language is that which justifies the being able to give a person the property of being a moral patient, the subject in question, right? And you'll have to forgive me if my brain is a little slower. It is late. Oh yeah, and so the contradiction would be affirmed because it would be P and not P, by giving him that exact being that matches his answer, so that supposedly, hypothetically, would, because the question, to be clear, is what is it that is true of the animals that if it were true of the human would justify having the same attitude, right? And he said it was having language. He didn't feel or wasn't convinced that animals had language, and he was convinced that humans had language. And his terminology that he was using was that there either was or was not morality, which was confusing. And that's why I've been trying to determine if he was talking about the property being a moral patient or the property being a moral agent, which is tangential. And it seems like he's kind of flip-flopped between the two. But, you know, like, that's the two ways I feel like we can interpret that, as near as I can tell. And so, yeah, the contradiction gets affirmed if he rejects that being. And then the question becomes, like, what is the answer to the question then?
The premises are language capabilities.
You're talking to someone who teaches advanced logic, my friend. You know, it's just not true. Okay, tell me the premise. Write them down. Premise 1, premise 2.
Yeah. So the premise.
You pretend you're in my course. See if you're going to pass my course. Go ahead.
Yeah. The premises that form the contradiction is that that language capability is a morally salient trait. And the contradiction is...
Yeah, I still think it's strange the way he says morally salient trait. You know, I would say something like, is sufficiently morally justified such that you would consider it okay to go through with the action, or something like that.
Language capability is a morally salient trait, and language capability is not a morally salient trait. That's the contradictions.
No, dude, that's not... You are not understanding it all. Language is a morally salient trait for me. For the holder of the
Yeah,
moral.
for you.
Right, not for the object. So if we take a step to this, let me try and explain this.
Yeah, it seems like he's not tracking what name the trait is asking. And, you know, the fact that he very well may have affirmed a contradiction. But if not, then he just wasn't answering the question, in which case I'd like him to answer the question.
Not a grade 9 student, but let me try.
No. Hang on one sec, I gotta fix the audio. There we go.
Trying to explain this as if I was a student, okay? There is a subject and there is an object, right? In what you're posing, right? And the subject of morality...
Sorry,
where
guys.
the morals are held. If I'm, whatever it is, Jeffrey Dahmer or whatever, or if I'm, I don't know, Atal Bihari Vajpayee or something, I don't know, pick someone at random. How I see the world, right, determines, so Atal Bihari Vajpayee was supposedly a vegetarian, but he loved to eat meat in Pakistan. So whether or not he was going to eat meat depended on where he was, right? If he was in India, he was a pure vegetarian. If he was in Pakistan, he was, right? So his geographic location, right, changed his relationship to a food.
I mean, this is all straying away from what we were asking with name the trait, right? The question on the table is, what is the traits that are true of the animals, that if they were true of the humans, would justify you having that same attitude? And it seems like what you were putting forward is the trait of having language. And when you were given a being that didn't have language, you rejected that. You rejected the situation where you would not extend moral consideration to that being, which logically contradicts yourself, because you said that what made the difference was language, unless that wasn't the answer to the question, which seems like that might be the case. It seems like you're just not tracking, which makes me doubt that this guy is a teacher of advanced logic, but we'll see.
Right? Now, you're changing the something to do with the object. It's completely irrelevant. Has nothing to do with it. I'm telling you that the way I see humans, and why I differentiate all humans, even humans who don't have the actualization of language, one of the reasons that they are separate from other species, not the only reason, but one of the reasons is that they have language and therefore they have morality. That is something that applies to all humans, even specific humans who may not have that characteristic. And what I'm telling you is that all cows do not have that characteristic. There's no such thing as a cow who I can step into a bar with and have a debate with, right? So that just doesn't exist, right? So I'm telling you that all cows, even if there's a particularly clever cow, are... I'm here.
I gotta add, guys. I'm not on YouTube Premium, unfortunately.
I'm entitled to eat, right? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but again, so the point is that
subject-object distinction. I mean, I would advise you not to pursue this anymore, because you're talking with a logic teacher here.
I mean, do you want me to show you a propositionally logically valid?
You can try.
Yeah, I can make you an argument right now. Just check your ask a vegan chat. Yeah, there goes your formal argument.
If your view affirms that a given human trait is trait equalizable, I don't understand the first premise. Non-human animals moral.
Well,
No. Therefore, if you... Yeah, no, I don't know what the hell you're on about.
This is why I doubt this guy.
So I try and explain this. I try and explain.
This is why I doubt this guy is a logic teacher, right? Or a teacher of advanced logic, as he says. He just got presented a formal argument that is such. P1. If your view affirms a given human is trait equalizable to a given non-human animal while retaining moral value, then your view can only deny the given non-human animal has moral value on pain of P and not P. Premise 2. Your view affirms a given human trait is trait equalizable, your view affirms a given human is trait equalizable to a given non-human animal while retaining moral value. Conclusion. Therefore, your view can only deny the given non-human animal has moral value on pain of P and not P. So this is actually a formally valid argument. That's the first thing that should be noted. If he's going to reject one of the premises, he needs to, or if he needs clarification on the premises, he needs to point out which premise needs clarification and what he doesn't understand, so that can be clarified. Or if he's rejecting one of the premises, like what's the basis for the rejection of that premise?
It's a modus
There's
ponens.
no way.
It's a modus ponens. You do know what modus ponens is, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But
So-
you haven't.
See, his answer when he says, "Do you know what modus ponens is yeah, sure." Like that's so convincing.
You don't know what it is, man, because you're not doing it right, man. Again, so
See,
wait,
this is why I doubt this guy. The responses he's giving are the responses I would expect from somebody who doesn't understand logic, right? Like he's like, like what were his words exactly?
Modus ponens. You do know what modus ponens is, right?
yeah.
You're just not
Yeah.
doing it
But
right,
it's- but you
right?
haven't. But you
Like
haven't got. You don't know what it is, man.
you don't know what it
You're not
is.
doing it right, man.
You don't
Again,
know what it
so-
is, man. You're not doing it right. Like, are you serious? Like, it's pointing out a logical problem. Like, that's not actually interacting with the argument. Like, you just got given a formally valid argument, and like, you're not even interacting with it. Like, I kind of doubt that this guy is an advanced logic teacher.
So
No, wait, hold on. So, if you want, you could take the argument home, and we could discuss it tomorrow because I'm running short of time. But basically, just tell me which premise do you disagree with while you're at it.
So the premise that has human and non-human, you're losing me. There needs to,
That's not good enough. You can't just say you're losing me. You need to actually tell like what needs clarification. What about it do you not understand?
be something about subject to objects. So morality, what I'm trying to explain to you and that you're just not getting, is that the way I treat the cow has nothing to do with the cow. Has nothing to do with the cow. It has to do with me.
See, and now he's not interacting with the argument. He just got given a formally valid argument that describes precisely why and how he affirmed a contradiction on his view, and he's not actually interacting with the argument. Like, I would expect a teacher of advanced logic to interact with the argument directly and clearly, right? Like, I would expect this person to be familiar with and, have a robust understanding of, like, logic and how to interact with it, right? But the responses I hear from him just more and more remind me of someone who's just not familiar with formal logic.
The way the lion treats the cow has nothing to do with the lion. Has nothing to do with the cow.
Yeah, I
Has to
agree
do
with
with
that. Yeah, I agree with
Right?
that. It has
So
got
so
nothing to do
given
with,
that, the fact that I have morality will never change the way that I treat another human. You understand? The other human may change how they treat me. But the fact that I am a moral agent will never, ever change, no matter the circumstances of that particular human. And it's not a logical inconsistency to say that. In fact, the way that you're posing it is a non sequitur, because
it's a complete straw man position, right?
if I can try and put your argument in better terms, right? In terms that would actually make sense. This doesn't make any sense. If I put
See, like he's not actually interacting with it. He's just saying it doesn't make sense. He's just like like this isn't actually interacting with the argument. Like, what about it do you not understand? Like, you can ask for clarification, obviously, if there's any part of it that's not clear to you.
your argument in terms that would make sense, you are positing that there is such a thing as a mammalian biological system. Okay?
No, that's not.
And
Wait, what's the argument for that? How does my argument entail that?
I'm trying to give your argument a charitable definition.
That's a great question, Appoota. I'd love to know that as well. How is that entailed by the argument?
This is something that I would actually believed when I was vegan, right? What I'm about to articulate.
We got another ad.
So there are such things as mammalian systems that are.
Okay, y'all. Sorry about the interruption again. I am recording yet again. I've been having a little bit of technical difficulties, so I'm really hoping that this time works out. We'll see. All right. Without further ado, let's get back into it. Come on, load.
There are such things as mammalian systems that are 90% the same. We know that all mammals share whatever 87% of the DNA, blah blah blah, right? And the way that we, the way that we treat those different mammalian systems depends in a large part on how they treat us, right? And therefore, I'm likely to treat someone who talks some biological system, whether it's human or animal. I'm likely to treat that a certain way, given on how that understands me, given on its own moral understandings and so on, right? And
Wait,
I can see.
Why
this is
would
something
that be relevant? Like, if you just take a human baby, for example, the baby can't. It wouldn't have any opinion about how to treat you,
Okay.
but you would still treat the baby.
So if you don't buy that argument, then I don't even see what you're trying. Try.
Yeah,
tell me-
sure.
just
So
explain it.
what we could do.
Now, if you noticed, he actually just dodged the question with a ramble, right? Like, the question was, how is the existence of a mammalian biological system entailed by the argument presented? And he didn't actually answer the question. Like, he did not tell us how that is the case. Instead, he just went on a ramble, right? And then Appoota, unfortunately, seems to have gotten distracted, right? So. We're having a slow loading day today.
Is you could just take the argument. By the way, this is not my argument. This was this argument was posited by a person called Isaac Brown from Ask Yourself. So there's a channel called Ask Yourself. You could just go. I'm running his argument basically. He also has a Discord server. So if you want to go and hash it out directly with him, that's also fine. But I could do the same, right? So I could do the same. And this argument has been it has been shown to multiple philosophy PhDs, and most of them agree that it is sound. I'm not appealing to authority or anything. You could question the soundness and come up with some argument against it. That's fine. But right now, what you could do is take the argument home. We could just try to wrap your head around it. And
I'm not really interested, to be honest, man. If this is what you want to talk about next time, I'm bored to death, man. This is silly. So.
See, this is just more responses from Samir that give me the impression that he's not familiar with formal logic. I mean, let me know. Can any of y'all out there imagine there being a teacher of advanced formal logic, right, who was presented a formally valid argument demonstrating a contradiction on his view, and when pressed on that, he simply says, let's hear what he says again. Let me play it here.
We we could just try to wrap your head around it. And
Look, dude, I'm not really interested, to be honest, man. If this is what you want to talk about next time, I'm bored to death, man. This is silly. So
He says, I'm bored to death. This is silly. I'm not really interested. Right? Does that sound like the response you would expect from a teacher of advanced formal logic when presented with a formally valid argument demonstrating a logical contradiction on their view? Like, no. You would expect them to engage with the argument. Like, to actually have a response. And the fact that he's bored by this just goes to show that it's not a telltale sign, but again, why don't you guys tell me in the comments, like, can you even fathom a teacher of advanced logic having that position? Because to me, it's absolutely ridiculous. Like, he's not interested in a formally valid argument demonstrating a contradiction on his view. He's bored. Like, you gotta be kidding me.
So, like, we can agree to disagree on this all you like. But this is just not the case that what you're presenting.
No, so wait, let me get this straight. Do you agree that there is a difference in the treatment that you're according to two different people, two subjects?
Two different people, two different human beings.
Two different subjects. It can be human or
no, don't give me this two different subjects, man. What are you talking about?
Yeah, so see,
if you're talking about that I treat even if I treat my pet dog the way that I treat my wife, obviously no, I do not.
Yeah,
right?
so,
yeah, we could run name the trait on your pet dog and your wife. Like, there's no reason we couldn't do that, but we're not running name the trait on your pet and your wife. We're running it on, like, a cow and a human.
there is some certain symmetry breakers that would force you to do that, right?
Force me to do what? To treat people differently? To treat
so
organisms
there
differently?
There would be certain symmetry breakers that would justify you according differential treatment to two different subjects, regardless of who they are. And I'm asking you for a... No, I'm not.
No, but
I'm just asking you what's the symmetry breaker.
No, but if you ask me this in terms of human beings, so if you say there's two strangers and one is black and one is white, would you treat them differently? I have to answer no.
Okay, that's fine. Run name the trait on two different races, and if you decide that there is no trait that's true of one, that if true of the others would justify you having this a differential moral attitude towards them, with respect to, for example, extending them rights, then yeah, we can run name the trait on that too. And in the same way that a vegan is going to say, no, there is not a morally relevant difference between a human and an animal, which justifies stabbing them in the neck for food, right? Then, in the same way that you can't run that name the trait and get the response that you would normally expect with a non-vegan, right, where they would actually move down in the dialogue tree. You can do that with the different races too. But again, we're not running name the trait on two different races. We're running name the trait on the cow and the human, or whatever animals you decide don't have enough moral value such that you would consider it morally obligatory to avoid stabbing them in the neck for your own benefits.
Absolutely not, right? If you say there is a cow and a cat, would I treat them differently? Of course I treat them differently. I'm not an idiot.
Yeah, we could run name the trait on a cow and a cat too, but again, we're not doing that. And he seems to understand the concept, right? Like, he answered name the trait for the different races example that he presented, and so he clearly understands what's being asked of him. I don't know why he doesn't want to answer, presumably because he doesn't want to reveal the reasoning behind his position in order to not be embarrassed by his poor choice of reasoning.
Right? So this is where I think, I don't know who you're listening to.
Treat them differently in what sense?
The way I play with a cow is not the way I play with a cat.
Sure.
The way I make friends with a cow is not the
So
way I
you
make friends
could-
with a cat.
Yeah, so
right?
you could say that there is
Yeah.
a probable symmetry breaker that justifies that difference in treatment.
No, this probable symmetry breaker, you're losing me, man. I'm in biology and anthropology. We are programmed to
Yeah,
treat
but-
different biological things in different ways.
No, I'm
so when
just
you're
using
positing
the
this one
advanced
massive,
logic
this one category, when you're using this one category of organism, it's not going to work, right?
What? What is that supposed to mean? When using this one category of organism, that's not going to work. What? That definitely needs clarification. I really have no idea what he's talking
Why
about.
is that?
It's not how humans are wired. We are not wired to treat all organisms the same. We're not wired to treat all people.
I
the
mean,
same.
you don't have to treat them the same. It's just that you could treat them such that you don't violate the rights.
How does it have rights? Like, we're getting back to terms that we've agreed that don't exist for animals, right?
I mean,
Cat does not have a right.
currently don't, but that doesn't mean that they don't have rights at all.
I would argue that they are, I would argue that they don't have rights. They have rights insofar as humans decide that there are codes that we should apply to them.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, that's how I understand rights to be. Yeah, they are codes that we moral codes, to use the same language that he was using, which we generally apply to people, such as, don't kill or, don't violate bodily autonomy, things like that, right? So...
it would come down to
I
the
mean,
same argument.
I spend time in the Kalahari Desert, man. Animals don't have rights, man.
What does that even mean? I spent time in the desert, bro. Animals don't have rights. What, is that supposed to be an argument?
Yeah,
spend
so
most of my time.
wait, I understand that, but it's going to come down to the same question. Now, you accord rights to humans, but you don't accord rights to non-humans, right? So there is
Any sensible person.
No,
Yeah.
wait.
Yeah.
There is a differential treatment that you're according to two different subjects, and there needs
So
to be a
I mean, I treat
symmetry that
I
justifies
treat my
this.
laptop different than I treat my desktop. Like,
Yes, we can run name the trait between your laptop and your desktop as well. There's no reason we can't do that. Like, but again, we're not running name the trait on your desktop and your laptop. It's on the cow and the human. Like, this guy just needs to answer the question. Like, he clearly understands it. Like, which makes, I mean, the fact that he seems to understand the question, especially in other contexts, but refuses to answer or pretends like he doesn't understand in the human context when it's a human and a cow, right, that are being trade equalized, it implies sophistry. I mean, like, I feel like this guy's being a sophist.
I mean, I don't understand the differential.
Yeah, but there is a difference, right? There is a symmetry breaker that justifies treating them differently, which doesn't exist on my view. Doesn't exist when you're talking about, say, humans and non-humans.
Right, I mentioned this earlier. When you run name the trait on a vegan, it's going to be really short and quick and easy because they're just going to say, I don't find there to be a morally relevant difference between non-humans and humans, which justifies stabbing one in the neck for food and not the other.
Yeah, so the problem I have with this entire frame of thought is that it is used by vegans time and time again to equate animal husbandry with things like slavery, with things like murder, with things like rape. This is beyond vile, in my opinion, who's worked against.
Yeah, it's
rape.
beyond vile because, of course,
Let me rewind that a little bit.
Things like slavery, with things like murder, with things.
The My computer's struggling with it. Come on.
Yeah, so the problem I have with this entire frame of thought is that it is used by vegans time and time again to equate animal husbandry with things like slavery, with things like murder, with things like rape. This is beyond vile.
Animal husbandry. What is that? Isn't that just like another term for farming? Let me double check. Hey Google, what is animal husbandry?
According to Wikipedia, animal husbandry is the branch of agriculture concerned with animals that are raised for meat, fiber, milk, or other products. It includes day-to-day care, selective breeding, and the raising of livestock.
Okay, yeah, so it's just another word for farming. So, yeah, it's, I mean, it's not equating slavery and animal husbandry. It's not equating sexual assault and animal husbandry. It's not equating murder and animal husbandry. It's merely positing that it falls under these categories, right? As near as I can tell, it's absolutely true that animals are enslaved. As near as I can tell, it's absolutely true that animals are sexually assaulted. And it's also true that animals are murdered in animal husbandry. So, unless you have an argument for why that's not the case, then I don't see why I would accept that position as being true.
Who's worked against.
Yeah, it's beyond wild because, I mean, of course, billions of animals as opposed to a few million slaves. Yeah, it's absolutely wild to compare both of them.
Dude, but how much time have you spent on a farm? How much time have you spent, working with cows?
What does that have to do with
I
anything? Like, who cares? Like, whether he spent his entire life surrounded by cows or he's never seen a cow in his entire life. That has nothing to do with the argument that's being presented. That has nothing to do with the contradiction that is entailed by your, seems to be entailed by your view, right? So, yeah. Samir is clearly not following the conversation. And unfortunately,
I spent time both on farms and I spent time in anti-trafficking, and I can.
Unfortunately, it seems that Appoota tends to get distracted by his rambling and general not tracking of the conversation.
I tell you that the people who you're comparing with animal.
Yeah, I mean,
really
I've spent a considerable amount of my childhood doing that, but even if I didn't, that wouldn't invalidate my argument.
Precisely. Not only that, but there isn't a comparison happening here. Again, it's been clearly explained. We have hypothetical being A, which is a human, a non-human, hypothetical being B, which is a human, and then hypothetical being C, which is a trait equalized human, where we equalize the traits that are true of hypothetical being A to be true of hypothetical being C in the context of hypothetical being B. So, for example, just to give a simple example, I think I might have given this earlier in the video. I've had to record this multiple times, so I'm not sure which parts are still recorded and which ones aren't. But let's say I gave you a cow as hypothetical being A and human as hypothetical being B. And then the differential trait we decided to equalize was the hooves, right? So in hypothetical being C, we have a human being with cow hooves, right? And so that it's not a comparison. What we're asking is, what is the morally relevant difference between hypothetical being A and hypothetical being B, which justify having that differential attitude such that you would say it's fine to murder them in one case but not the other. That's not a comparison. And even if it was a comparison, like, you being upset by the comparison doesn't actually interact with the argument, right? Like, it's just an appeal to incredulity. Or, sorry, not an appeal to incredulity, an appeal to emotion.
No, your argument isn't valid to begin with.
Oh, it is valid. The argument is modus ponens. Unless you're saying modus ponens is not a valid form.
See, there's no way. There's just no way this guy is an advanced teacher of logic. Like, he just tried to claim that a modus ponens is invalid, right? Like, this is one of the first things you learning logic. Like, I'm not that good at logic. I only know, like, some of the basics, and even that is hilarious to me. Like, the fact that modus ponens is a valid argument is something that is extremely basic, in terms of learning logic. Like, the fact that he just called a modus ponens invalid just goes to show just how poor his understanding of formal logic is. Like, he seriously has no idea what he's talking about with respect to formal logic. Even Appoota noticed that. He's like, what? Are you serious?
Okay.
He's laughing about
another
it.
rabbit hole if you ask me.
No. I mean, I don't know. Listen, this premise, your premise one. Let's go through it. Let's go through it again if you haven't.
So I think what just happened just now was he got called out for calling a modus ponens invalid, and then at that moment, I think he realized just how stupid he sounds, and just how ridiculous he's starting to sound in terms of how he's responding to the argument, right? And so he's like, maybe I should actually address the argument, go through the premises and address each premise, right? And give a response, because so far he hasn't really done that. He's just kind of gone, oh, it's BS, oh, it's I don't understand it, this isn't clear, he hasn't given any actual interactions with the argument, or he hasn't, for example, he hasn't described which premise he rejects, and he hasn't given any reasons for rejecting the premise. He hasn't identified any other logical problems with the argument. So, yeah. But maybe he's about to. I mean, the fact that he seems to have realized how ridiculous he is being and is now willing to address the argument is something. So, we'll see.
If your view affirms a given human trait is trait equalizable to a given non-human animal. No, I do not. I never said that. That's not a premise that I hold.
It's a conditional. It's a conditional, my dude. Like, it's just saying if your view affirms this, then it's true. Like, so you're not disagreeing with the premise, even if you say that, like, your view doesn't affirm this. Like, the premise just says if this, then that. It's a very simple conditional. Like, this guy doesn't know formal logic. There's no way he's a teacher of advanced formal logic. Like, I'm just calling BS on this. I know I've said that so much already, but he just gives me more and more reasons to keep thinking that.
No human trait is equalizable to a given non-human animal. For example, bees have more complex. We talked about.
No human trait is equalizable to a non-human animal. Okay, that is just straight up false. I mean, I equalized the trait of having hooves earlier, right? One second, I'm just going to change my lighting in here real quick. The sun is starting to shine on things. Alrighty, here we go. Where was I? Let me just rewind it just a tad.
No human trait is equalizable to a given non-human animal. For example, bees have more complex.
Yeah, right. So no human trait is equalizable. Well, that's obviously false, because we already just equalized one of the traits earlier, which was the hooves. And here I'll just equalize all the traits. Hypothetical being A, chicken. Hypothetical being B, human. And then I'm going to equalize all of the traits that are true of the chicken to be true of the human in hypothetical being C, which is the trait equalized human. And so now we take all of the traits that are true of the chicken and make them now true of the human, right? And so hypothetical being C is a trait equalized human that is identical to a chicken in every way. all of the propositions true of the chicken are true of hypothetical being C. There you go. I just equalized all of the traits. And his claim is that no trait is equalizable. Like, how is that the case? It sounds like he's misunderstanding what the trait equalization process even is in the first place. Like, he clearly is not understanding what's going on in some sort of way. Like, I know he understands the question that's being asked of him because he's demonstrated clarity on that with respect to other examples. For like, remember when he presented the example of the race name the trait, right? Where you have two different races, and his answer is no, right? Like, he understands the concept of there being a symmetry breaker between the two and having to present that. But I'm pretty sure he's just playing sophist. But it could be true, though, that he doesn't understand the trait equalization process.
Wait, you didn't even read the entire thing, dude.
Because I can't get through the first clause because it has something that I don't agree with in a premise. Right?
Yeah, so you need to read the entire premise before you decide whether you disagree.
If your view affirms that a given human trait is trait normal, then your view can only deny the given. An animal, no, this is all bullshit, man. So the first part of this,
you don't understand it, that's a different.
See, that's what I'm talking about. Like, this is all bullshit, man. That was his response. Like, this is the type of answer I would expect from somebody who doesn't know anything about formal logic, right? Like, he doesn't interact with the argument. He just kind of throws up his hands and goes, "Oh, this is all bullshit." Like, there's no way this guy is an advanced teacher of logic. Calling it.
Do you want to try and explain it to me again, dude?
Yeah, sure. So that's what I was trying with the example, but you just like went on a rant. So I'm running low on time, so I gotta go. If you want, we could just pick it up from here tomorrow. Is that fine?
I mean, if you want to, I feel like I'm wasting my time here because you're not explaining to me as you mean. Can you explain in just 2 sentences? You asked me to explain 2 articles, 2,000 words in 2 sentences.
Yeah,
Can you just explain this to me in a simple sentence? That first premise, what are you trying to say?
Yeah, so when I mean trivial terms, a given human trait is trait equalizing to a non-human while retaining moral value, then you can only deny the non-human has moral value and gain conflict. That means when you have 2 subjects, a human and a non-human, and your view affirms that if a human is trait equalized meaning all the traits that are possessed by the non-human are given to the human, at that...
Not given to the human, but given to the trait equalized human, right? That's hypothetical being C. I think it's important to make that clarification because I think that's where his confusion comes, where he's thinking that there's some transformation or transmogrification happening with respect to the human about the traits true of the animal, which is not what's occurring. So that is a common misconception, a common confusion with name the trait. Yeah, I wish that would get cleared up.
Point, if you say
what you just said is impossible. What you just said would involve making a human grow an extra stomach, case of a cow. Like, it's just not possible. You're asking me to believe a logical impossibility.
No, this is not a logical impossibility. It's not completely logically possible.
Okay, Appoota, please don't just reject that it's logically impossible and then assert that it is logically possible. Like, that doesn't really further the conversation much. But instead, if he wants to claim that there's an impossibility on your view, a logical impossibility, then it's on him to demonstrate that. The burden of proof of there being a contradiction would be on him for that, right? So if he's the one claiming, oh, there's a logical impossibility on your view, ask him to spell it out for you. Like, spell out the contradiction and show which premises you've asserted that entail the contradiction, right? Like, because that's what he would need to do in order to back that up. And if you pressed him on that, he would probably flail because I seriously doubt there's a contradiction on your view, at least here.
It might be
dude,
biologically
sorry.
or physically impossible. That's fine, but it's a logical impossibility.
No, it is a logical impossibility that someone will have a disability such that they are
Wait,
they are identical to a cow.
possibility?
Yeah, if you think there's a logical impossibility here, you have to demonstrate the contradiction. Like, that's your burden.
Someone will be identical with a cow. Is that what you're saying? A human being will be born that is identical
Yeah,
with a cow.
you could mask their traits to match that of the cow. Yes, logically possible.
Yeah, see, it is logically possible to trait equalize humans and non-human animals, but I think that Samir just doesn't understand what the trait equalization process is. So I think, yeah, again, I wish that would be clarified, and I think it would help the conversation to be more productive a lot.
No, dude, sorry. This is failing my thought experiment class. That is not within the realm of...
Well, your course is not that great. That's
Yeah, now he's saying you're failing my thought experiment class. I thought said he was teaching logic. Now he's talking about a thought experiment class? I mean, it sounds like he doesn't teach formal logic then, if he's just teaching a thought experiment class, but I don't know.
I'll you can come with me to McGill, dude, where I got my education and talk with my profs.
Yeah,
This
that's
is
fine.
not
You could
this
also
is not
talk to the guy who formulated the argument who himself is a philosopher.
Listen, if you accept that, right? If you accept that it is possible for a human to be a cat, A, you're an idiot, and B, I suppose this makes sense. I don't accept that. I don't accept. Listen, I did my whole. I told you I have a degree in moral philosophy. What was my thesis in my degree on moral philosophy? On the stupidity of thought experiments.
So this guy, he's teaching a thought experiment class, but his thesis on his moral philosophy degree was on the stupidity of thought experiments. So presumably in this class, he's sitting there teaching about how stupid thought experiments are in the thought experiment class. I mean, this is just ridiculous.
Right? So we gotta pretend like if you're working in some world where a human can be a human and still be a cow, that is not the real world. So
I mean, it doesn't have to be the real world in order to derive a contradiction.
While it's true that it doesn't have to be the real world to entail a contradiction, it's also true that there seems to be a misunderstanding on his view regarding the trait equalization process, because he thinks that we're turning a human into another animal, which is not the case, right? Like, we're just changing propositions true of the animal to be true of the trait equalized human. That's what we're doing. Which is simply a hypothetical being. There's no transformation occurring.
Sure, fair enough. But then I have no interest in having a discussion. It's completely academic. I'm interested in getting my hand.
Now the video actually cuts off here, so that's going to be the end of it. And I am going to cut off this video as well, because this video is long enough. But yeah, I hope that you all enjoyed. If you appreciate this type of content, if you like reactions to vegan content, you like content that encourages people to think more critically, suchly things, then definitely please drop me a like, and as well as subscribe. Just getting started here. I'm planning on coming out with a mixed bag of long form and short form content, probably with more weight, heavier, lopsided on the long form content side.
Running the dialogue.
Excuse me. Sorry about that.
Or some kind of false assumption. So if you think there's like a loaded question with a false assumption.
Okay, sorry about that. I just fixed it.
Or if you think there's some kind of invalid argument.
Holy. Sorry, 1 second. Okay, I think it's actually fixed now. Anyways, like I was saying, I'm gonna have a mixed bag of mostly long form content with some short form content as well. And yeah, I would really appreciate all of your support. And thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you have a great rest of your day or night or whatever it is. And I'll catch y'all in the next one. Peace out.